microphones, huh? Praise the Lord. Maybe it was just better be paid for. Except for the judge.
Good evening and welcome to the East Palo Alto City Council meeting. The date is Tuesday, March 4th, and it's 7:37 p.m. We are pleased to have our neighbors, friends, and visitors here tonight. If you would like to speak on an item this evening, please complete a speaker's form, which is on the small table next to the door, right over there. You will have an opportunity to speak to items not on the agenda under Community Forum. If you wish to speak on an item on the agenda, please indicate the number on the speaker's form. We respectfully ask, out of courtesy to everyone in attendance, that audience members do not clap or boo when a particular item is being discussed. We do this for two reasons. Out of courtesy to everyone who is in attendance, we want to hear all perspectives and want to make sure that no one feels intimidated by stating their opinions and ideas. And we also want to keep the meeting moving, or the meeting moving, so that we can conclude our business in a timely fashion. Again, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for your courtesy. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes. Councilmember Moody.
Present.
Councilmember Abrica.
Here.
Vice Mayor Gaucher.
Here.
Mayor Martinez.
Here.
Let the record reflect that Councilmember Rutherford is not present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, let's look at our agenda tonight. Do any council members want to make amendments to the agenda?
Not to the agenda, but I'd like to make a motion that we
Motion?
approve the agenda. And at the end of this meeting, I'd like to also close tonight's meeting in the memory of Jonathan Watts.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Mayor Gaucher, a second by Councilmember Moody. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes with 4 yes votes. Do we have public comment regarding consent calendar items?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on to consent calendar. Would someone like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion. First, I'd like to table item H1, the proclamation honoring Beverly Beasley Johnson, until a later meeting.
Okay,
Also, I'd like to pull item H2, the proclamation or the acknowledgement for Bob Hoover.
okay. All right, so,
I'll make a motion to approve consent calendar, continuing item H1 and then pulling H2.
okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Abrica. Do we have a second?
I second it.
A second by Vice Mayor Gaucher. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes with 4 yes votes. Okay, so item H2.
So for item H2, this is a proclamation for one of our residents in East Palo Alto, and I want to thank Dr. Faye McNair for her assistance as well. And the proclamation states, "A proclamation of the City of East Palo Alto acknowledging the contributions of Robert Bob Hoover as a community leader in the City of East Palo Alto. Whereas for more than 6 decades, Mr. Hoover has modeled quintessential servant leadership as a true institution in the East Palo Alto community, someone who has unselfishly shared a natural ability to lead people to find self-worth and self-esteem through working as an activist and an educator." And I won't read the whole thing, but then I'm going to skip down. "Whereas Bob has endured himself to generations of individuals who have championed quality of life improvement initiatives in East Palo Alto, especially because of his genuine love for his unique village with so much promise. Whether one was privileged to shadow him in the 1950s or last week, Robert Hoover's powerful influence on the local leaders has been the same, that of passionate, relentless, characteristic role model who gets results. Now, be it further resolved that the City of East Palo Alto, the City Council of the City of East Palo Alto commends Robert Hoover for his inspirational and tireless dedication and leadership to the people of East Palo Alto."
Speak.
Would Mr. Hoover like to say a few words?
I think it was a little bit overboard, but I appreciate the proclamation and the council's recognition of what I've tried to do since 1962. I love this community, and it's been a great ride. I've had the pleasure of sharing the lives of so many people and them sharing my life and making my life happier, stronger, and I thank the community of East Palo Alto for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I just want to make sure that the community recognizes, understands that our own Mr. Hoover has been recognized with the Jefferson Award, which is a
Yes,
very distinct honor.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so moving on to written communications. We have none. Special presentations, we have none. Oral reports. Reports out of closed session.
We have no items to report out of closed session.
Okay. 6B, staff reports.
We have none this evening, thank you.
Okay. City council reports.
None for me.
Chair, I do have one. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Councilmember Rica.
I did have a chance to attend for part of it, one of the planning session committees that we appointed, one for the West Side Plan. And it just reminded me that I know the council had and the staff had agreed to give us some regular reports. We didn't really set any, I think we might have said like quarterly, but I think if in the near future the staff can give us a report on both the general plan and then the West Side Plan, yeah, I think so. I wanted to just make
Yeah, we
that
have that
request.
scheduled for the next meeting.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. And then I just had one request, or at least clarification, because I had some community members talk to me about a document that was presented to the Planning Commission, and this is regarding the second unit process that we've been engaging in, and I know now there was some report to the Planning Commission. So it is, I did get a chance to review the packet to the Plan Commission. It appears to be the one that, it's probably a little on the technical side or legal side, and it may be a little hard to understand. In this case, there were some people who were wondering if the document could be translated, at least have some of the key phrases or some summary translation. I think it's a legitimate request, but apparently they were saying either the staff wasn't sure what to do. So I just want to, I don't know if it needs our approval as a council, but I think it's consistent with just trying to, the best communication we can have if people make a request like that, then, if we can do that. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, do you want to respond, City Manager?
Yeah, actually, thank you for raising that question. Staff has been talking about that, and as you know, we've not translated ordinances in the past. We have some ideas of how we'd like to deal with that, and I think that you're right. We want to make sure that this is an open process as much as possible. We've tried to do this entire process bilingual because we know that it's impacting the entire community, and so we wanted to make sure the information is very clear. We have some ideas of doing perhaps some additional process around this topic, what that will mean. And in fact, we're scheduled to meet with the mayor and vice mayor about that. I wanted to get a little more clarification from the two of them to see what their desire was in terms of how to handle that. We have some interest in perhaps having additional community input and providing some more information in Spanish that will delay, that won't allow for us to bring the item forward on March 3rd. 18th, which was the plan. So it will delay a little bit, but we're hoping to discuss that with the mayor and vice mayor to see their interest in how we would like to proceed with that. But yes, we too have some ideas of what to do, and we believe that the community would benefit by an additional process and providing more information in Spanish.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been of the opinion that spending a little bit of money to go the extra step, particularly in cases where there's a lot of community involvement, and so translating something into Spanish or Tongan or Samoan, languages that in our community we know people at times may feel, if they have at least a summary of the key information, then they'll be better informed, they'll be able to participate more. So now, am I understanding that is going to be left up to the mayor and the vice mayor to decide? I guess what I'm asking is that we decide tonight, either we do it or we don't, because, yeah, I guess that's that would be my preference, because, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so I was going to actually make an announcement during city council reports, but staff is working with the community to work through a few issues, one of them being translation of the ordinance that you're talking about. So the community members who are interested in moving forward quickly are suggesting additional community processes, which is what we're talking about. So the vice mayor and I are going to meet this week to discuss that, but I don't see that translating the document would be a problem.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's all I wanted,
Yeah.
just to be clear then.
Yeah,
Okay,
no, and
all
then
right.
I was going to also
All right.
just announce that we are probably going to move the secondary dwelling item from the March 18th meeting to a later date in April. So I just wanted to let, the council know about that and the community know about that, because we are taking additional time to kind of look at this process.
Okay, so I just wanted to hear that part
Yeah.
about that, because I think that's the one that it's important for people to know.
Yep,
Yeah,
okay, all right,
thank you.
sounds good.
And the last thing I want to just mention is that I want to congratulate Mr. Mena Okello on a great job in the information publication that he sent out. I got one in my box, and I think it's very, very professionally done. It has a lot of information, and anyway, I just want to thank you for doing that.
Great job. Great job, Nita. Great
Okay,
job. Has everyone gotten one?
so I have, I guess I'll share my announcement, and then I think you have some announcements as
I do.
well. Okay. So our community development department, and I'll share this for John, we're going to be having our grand opening of our new permit center this Friday from 2:30 to 3:30 over at 1960 Tate Street. So this is really exciting. So if you're around, stop by for cake and coffee this Friday from 2:30 to 3:30. Thanks.
Okay. That's great. That's really exciting. I'm looking forward to that service being available to our community. It's kind of long overdue, and I know it's been a big part of our strategic efforts over the years. So congratulations. Many of you have seen this article in the paper over the last week and a half or so, and it's a spotlight on me as a city council member for travel expenses. And two of the newspapers, one in Palo Alto, the Daily and the Post, strongly suggest that Councilmember Larry Moody was in some areas in violation of our travel and conference policy. Now, we're going to begin talking about this on the next agenda item, but I wanted to take this time out to respond to my supporters and to my community that I strongly believe that the article which was written, both articles, were targeted, very targeted, and suggest that I have violated and abused the travel and conference fund. And as a result of this, the council is now proposing a new policy to address this issue. This cannot be further from the truth and is viewed by me and many of our supporters as a targeted attack that has no merit. The issue on the agenda, which we'll talk about this evening, is about framing the policy for our travel and conferences as we go forward. And interestingly enough, I raised this issue back in November or December, right, for consideration of this council. There never was a story. There never was one until now, and the story is how these papers can get away with attacking a community leader with a false or misleading accusation and get away with it. I attended 2 conferences in Sacramento this past year: the new council members' mayor's conference and the annual conference and expo, which I served as a voting delegate representing this council. Some of the workshops I attended were the economic development, spotlighting assets in your community to attract and retain new business, water supply infrastructure yesterday, today, and tomorrow, urban agriculture and the urban service boundary, African American caucus exhibits, Asian Pacific caucus exhibits, Latino caucus exhibits, 10 ways that cities waste money, and a host of others. Greetings to Councilmember Donna Rutherford. Not once did a reporter question me about the conference. Instead, they sought out information on how I traveled, what I ate for dinner, and where I ate. They were just looking for a smoking gun. One reporter even quoted our finance director in the paper without even talking to him directly, by cutting and pasting from the staff report. This type of unprofessional reporting only creates distractions to the work we are committed to providing the citizens of East Palo Alto. If you agree, consider writing the editors of the Palo Alto Daily and the Post to express your views. That's the only way this behavior can be addressed. Okay. I have 2 other items. I had a great dinner. On a lighter note, I had a great dinner with a couple of the Councilmember Gaucher and Councilmember Abrica and our city manager, who helped convene a great dinner at the Four Seasons Hotel with the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and Mr. Bob Hoover was in attendance. And I really look forward to the council having some more dialogue about that dinner and some of the ways that we can incorporate the methodology of the Rainbow Coalition into our strategic efforts here in East Palo Alto. So I was going to make comments about the behavioral health retreat that took place, but I would leave that to Council Member Rutherford, who gave up a week of her time to participate in this endeavor.
All right, welcome. We're just going over city council reports. So if you have any reports, now would be the time to do it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I apologize for my lateness. I'm on another board, and I had to be there to vote. So I made it here anyway. And I'll be brief, because I haven't caught my breath yet. So February 7th, I attended the State of the Valley Conference, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, the attendees received a briefing on the 2014 index. The indicators measure the strength of our economy and the health of our community. And it highlights the challenges and provides information for decision-making. February 17th through the 21st, I attended the Mosquito and Vector Board Conference in San Diego. That was a week-long conference, too. Most of the speakers talked about the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which has been found in several counties, and they're talking about what we need to do to help prevent more spread of this mosquito. And I know that there was a big deal in Menlo Park where the mosquito board went out and knocked on all the doors, and they worked with the CERT team also doing that to make that community aware of what they need to do. And it relates to all counties, because this is a mosquito that passes yellow fever to humans. So the key is that the public must be educated on what to look for and how to prevent. So if you have any problems, call San Mateo County Mosquito and Vector Board. And, you know, each city here in San Mateo County has a representative on that board, and they come out and do all kinds of things in the community, set up bait traps, and takes care of any kind of pest that you have problems with. Okay, then I participated in the Behavioral Health and Recovery Service Workshop. It was from February 24th through the 28th. And this is working with San Mateo County. One East Palo Alto helped convene this meeting, and what they're doing is they're trying to help improve the behavioral health services in East Palo Alto. And what they're calling it is the community service area. And so what everybody in the room did, nonprofits and faith-based organizations, everybody is looking at ways to help make improvements in the services that are provided here in East Palo Alto. And I'll be talking with the mayor more about that. It's very, very high intense, and it was definitely an experience I'll never forget, and it's just the beginning. And then I, on Friday, went to the Council of Cities dinner in Belmont, and on Saturday I read to the youngsters here at the library. So I've been very involved, and look forward to sharing more of this information. Got plenty of information. Anybody wants any of the information? I didn't go into great detail about it, but I have all the information here, and I'll be glad to share it with you. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So I think we'll go ahead and move on if we don't have any other city council reports. Can we go ahead and begin with community forum?
Okay, first speaker, Mr. Maida Okello, followed by Lovekin.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Maida Okello, 2211 Alto Avenue in East Palo Alto. I just wanted to bring to the council's attention an event that has happened to benefit the youth in this community for the last 13 years. It is the Al Julian Track Meet, and this year is happening on April the 5th. And the deadline for registrations for that particular event is actually on March the 21st. And I want to take a little time and just talk about the history. This is an event that was created by a group of parents whose children were attending Costanio School. And Councilmember Larry Moody was actually one of those founding parents. And they put together that event for 2 years, but then subsequently approached the Kiwanis Club and asked the Kiwanis Club to adopt it. And we did 13 years ago, and we've been doing it every year except for 1 year or two, and we've been too exhausted to pull it together, but I think we've made a long-term commitment to make sure that it happens. And the Al Julian Track Meet is a qualifying meet for an international meet that happens in Hershey's, Pennsylvania every August. And that particular meet was created by a doctor who realized as far back as 1975 that kids under 14 years of age were not involved in physical fitness activities. And so the track meet was created to encourage children throughout the country and even in Canada, to participate in physical fitness. And the format is fairly simple. The children are involved in basically 3 activities. You're either throwing a ball or doing a starting long jump, or you're running. Events that actually children can just practice at home with their parents. They don't need to have a track field. And I'll sum it up real quickly. I want to take this opportunity to, just to advise the council that it is happening and to encourage the council to do whatever it needs to do to ensure that our children participate. It's gaining a lot of interest from other communities. Redwood City is beginning to participate very strongly. And this year, even kids from Oakland are coming. We don't want them to overwhelm our kids, so anything that you can do to help encourage residents to register for it, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Next speaker, Oleg Lovrikin, followed by Pastor Timoteo Ulysses.
Hi, good evening. My name is Oleg Labikin, 538 Sacramento Street, East Palo Alto. A resident of East Palo Alto for about 12 years. I am a stone masonry restoration contractor. I am a sculptor. I am an artist. I would like to offer to City of East Palo Alto a piece of my work, artwork, a sculpture, free, no charge, as a temporary art installation somewhere in public place for people who live in this town. I do strongly believe that art can have social transformation and can benefit all people around. And the particular work, what I'm talking about, it has name Opus. It's a big piece. Dimensions are a little bit over 10 feet length, 8 feet high, and about 4 feet wide. Looks like metamorphic abstract piece, kind of like a Swiss cheese full of holes. It's not just a sculpture, it's also interactive piece. Kids can use it as a climbing wall and climb on it. I did actually try it with kids and children of my friends, and I got good feedback on that. And I would like to City of East Palo Alto consider something like arts, which one could benefit this community, not just in the sense of repairing or making new roads, which one actually cost more and probably don't have same impact as art could be. I'm not comparing those items, please forgive me about that, but that's what I would like to offer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pastor Timoteo Ilesi, followed by Michelle Dare.
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful moment, and I thank you for the City Council for giving me this opportunity. And the reason why I come to the podium tonight, because we have a special program, outreach and a partnership with in Pride with the management of the environment. I heard that the councilman speaks about this mosquito thing, and I believe in cleanliness. So we started in February for outreach in our church, the Samon Hallelujah Assembly of God. We start cleaning the Illinois street, and then last Saturday we start in Fordham, and we planned the whole year to do this in different streets. So this is our commitment to our city. We believe that cleanliness is next to success. And I believe when we come to take the streets, these people who come here and commit crimes, they will not come here anymore. Because I believe, I'm not preaching to you, but the Bible speaks about, am I my brother's keeper? And I believe, yes. The outreach is reaching out our men and women, reaching out our young people. We have to make this city a haven, a safe haven for our young people, for education, business, and also for worship, and for freedom for us to worship. Not only that, I asked the council to help us to, and also I approach or ask the other faith organization to help us in cleaning up our city. So it's a commitment to our city. And I want to finish, if I may have just a few seconds.
Sure.
I believe in one of the Japanese adage, it says, many pilots can land the plane. But our saying goes, many cooks spoil the soup. Why? Because when you cook, everyone has a different taste. But when you're on the plane, everyone wants to land the plane to get safe. And I believe our partnership in this one is very important to clean our city. And not only that, the assistant mayor speaks about translation. Our community is a multi-ethnic community, and communication is very important. And I pledge my time, I can do the translation for our own people, if you will, for the communication. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you.
Michelle Dare.
Good evening, City Council and City of East Palo Alto and management. I'm delighted to be here representing this effort that Reverend Timoteo has been putting forward. He actually started in January. He's conducted 3 partnership and pride events where he's working with his community to take to the streets and walk and inform our residents of different services that the city is already providing to the residents, and at the same time encouraging the residents to come out and share conversation about taking pride in the community, and I commend him for his efforts. Given a recent Cron 4 News article about the city, I feel that they misspoke strongly about what the city is doing, because probably the same day they were doing that article, we were out on the street with 60+ people cleaning the city. So I don't know how they missed us. But we were out there, and I feel dedicated to working together with residents, and I encourage everybody to come on out and help us out. We'll have an event on March 8th, which is this Saturday. We'll be meeting at the Runnymede Church. I believe it's at 992 Runnymede, the Alleluia Church. And then we're also meeting on April 19th to do some similar community service efforts throughout the city. That's Earth Day. So we encourage the residents and businesses and city council and everybody to come out and join us in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Claudie Thomas, followed by Michael Francois.
My name is Claudia J. Thomas, and in December, I got up to go walking, and my hood of my car was written "Tonga nigger," big letters. So I called the police. The police came, took pictures, and made a report. That was in December, and he was able to wash it off for me. So in January, my windshield was broken and the back window. I heard it. I got up. I thought it was coming from the back. So I went to the back, turned the lights on and everything, only to find out the next morning it was coming from the front. I called the police, and they told me they couldn't come because I didn't know who did it or didn't have a suspect. So he told me I would have to go on the internet and make a report. So he told me I could go to the library. And I said, is there anybody there that can help me? Well, in the meantime, the report didn't get done. So, and I think it's all from parking. When you have houses that got people in them with 10, 12 cars, it's not enough parking. So the city need to take, I've been living there for 56, 58 years. I never had anything like this to happen, so yes, I am upset.
Okay.
Thank you.
Michael Francois, followed by Wynn Gersich.
Evening, City Council. Mike Francois, 224 Gardenia Way, East Palo Alto. 4 things now. Ms. Thomas, I know her. I've known her since I was maybe 7 or younger. Her daughter and I grew up together. Anywho, we'll start off, I got about 2 fences and 2 streets. On the corner of Sage and West Area, there is a house that has a beautiful redwood fence. I think it's redwood, but it's 8 feet high. That's an injustice, because we have rules in this city that limits the height on a fence. All of you should go by and see it. It's in the gardens. Beautiful fence. But that owner of that property has to go along with the rules of the city. And I checked on it and I complained about it, that he's breaking the rules. And this has been going on for about 4 or 5, maybe even 6 months. His fence is still there. How long does a person have until they apply to the city rules? It's no respect. That's disrespect for the city, and he put it up, even though he did it over a weekend, and the code enforcement guy drives by it all the time. It's 8 feet. There's a limit. And I think John over there, well, he's not here. Oh, John Doherty knows the limit. You can ask him. The guy broke the rules. Second of all, this relates more to the school on Ronald McNair. That's an ugly fence, you know. We should have had some say-so in the city what type of fence goes around the school. That looks like a little prison. You know, I've been to prisons before because I used to work with the sheriff's office. It looks like a juvenile hall and a prison with that fence around it. You could have got it in green, you could have got it in black, and it could have been a little lower. That looks ugly. It wasn't needed. The school wasn't graffitiized or anything. That really looks ugly. It makes our city look like we had a little prison camp there. And last but not least, I need a few seconds. This is real simple. The street of Myrtle. It has 2 schools on it, but it has 25-mile-an-hour signs. The signs should be in yellow, because if they're in yellow, if you go over that speed limit and you hit somebody, then it says caution when it's yellow and 25. In fact, that's kind of fast for that street. And you have 2 schools, you have a veterans home there and so forth, okay? So I think you should look at that, maybe some speed bump. You got 2 schools, you can't be going 25 around down there. If it was a white sign and somebody got hit at 25, the city would be liable because you didn't warn them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wynn Gersich?
Hello, my name is Wynn Gersich, 30166 Industrial Parkway, Southwest Hayward. And I'm here tonight to talk about what's happening with Bosqua, and I'm sure Mr. Aprica notified all of you that they have a tunnel that is supposed to dump into the Calaveras Reservoir that's on the verge of collapse. And somehow this weak link in this pipe replacement was not figured into the price. So here they borrowed billions of dollars to replace these Hetch-Hetchy pipes, and now we have this problem with this one area because they claim it's going to be $38 million more to fix it, and San Francisco doesn't have the money. So just think, all we need is one little earthquake and this thing's going to collapse and you'll be without water. So I hope everybody in East Palo Alto has some things saved, because I was here years ago when they were saying the city council needed 3 tanks to have reserve water in case something happened, and you had $1 million, but you needed more than that. I know $1 million can build 1 tank, and it hasn't been built yet, right? And the thing that's very strange is that your pipes are on the verge of collapse anyway, and I know they paid Bob Bocod to do a study on, you know, to map out what you're going to do to the pipe replacement, and none of that's been done either. And I know the other cities will not lend you any water. So this city is in dire straits. And the scary part is because if they're going to jack up the water rates because of this drought, and they're going to jack up the water rates even more because of that tunnel, then this is not the time to be buying water to fill up those tanks if you ever get them built, because the water is going to be so expensive you won't be able to fill those tanks. So I think that this should be your number 1 priority is we're in dire straits right now, and you need some tank. And if you have $1 million that was set aside to build those things, at least build one of them. And everybody here should be informed that they need to keep a lot of water stored in their own homes and food and things like this, because this city, it's like Katrina waiting to happen, that your water pipes in the streets are bursting all over because of the chloramine and fluoride, and there is going to be there's a fluoride rally on March 22nd at Union Square in San Francisco, anti-fluoride, and I hope everybody shows up. Check out Clean Water Action.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Al Moore.
Al Moore, 256 Daphne Way. I'm here to talk about the construction that went on my street. I really wasn't pleased with it. You know, I appreciate the sidewalks getting done, but I've never known a company to lock people in their driveway, imprison you in your driveway. You know, when construction is being done, you tear a sidewalk out, you're supposed to put steel plates down, people can get in and out of the driveway. It's a lady 2 doors from me. She has a disabled kid. He's 20-something years old. He's disabled. All she does is rolls him around in a wheelchair. Sometimes we have to help go down there and help her. We really had to help her this time. She was coming across the embankment that was dug out in her driveway, and I've never seen a paving company like O'Grady do this type of stuff. You know, and then they turn around and, you know, park their equipment on the street. On our street. gave us no parking. We can't park on the street where they're doing the construction. Then they put all their equipment in the empty spaces. So people have to park all the way around the corner, or way down at the other end of the street. These are seniors. I don't mind walking. You know what I'm saying? And I'll give up my space just so they won't have to walk. But that doesn't make sense to me, that these people had to go through this. My wife comes in late at night. She had to park down the street. We couldn't get in our driveway. So I told them, I said, so if you guys don't come and go and do something about this, I'm gonna go get some cement and fill this hole in myself. It doesn't make sense. And they've been out there dragging their feet, for the past 2 weeks. I called the engineer about it. He didn't know. He wasn't aware of it. But when he got aware of it, he made them put some base rock back down in the hole. But that doesn't make sense for them to do seniors like that. And I understand, excuse me, I'm winding down. I understand that there's going to be some more work done on our street, but we just can't have that. I even fell in a pothole and hurt my knee, that they left wide open.
Thank you.
That concludes all your speakers.
Okay. All right, so moving on to policy and action, we have item 9A, General Fund Mid-Year 2013-2014 Budget Review and City Council Travel and Training Budget Allocation. And this item was continued from our February 18th meeting.
Thanks. Gosh. Sorry, Edmund. Make a mess of this. Turn it on. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Edmund Soon, Finance Director. We're here tonight to present a review of the fiscal year 2013-14 budget. This is traditionally what we call our mid-year review, looking at our revenues and expenditures and where we see we may end at the end of the year. So as a recap, when we adopted the 2013, when the City Council adopted the 2013-14 budget back in June of last year, we had revenues of $17 million and then expenditures of about $18 million. So obviously there was a deficit of $1 million. And if you count that into the general fund and also some use of one-time revenues to support the deficit, we were expecting that our general fund balance would be around $5 million. So let's go into the details in terms of where we think revenues and expenditures are compared to what we originally budgeted. And obviously conditions and circumstances change during the course of the year, so these numbers do vary as events and occur that prompt us to make those adjustments. So some of these large changes, if I may, property tax revenues are actually coming in a little bit better than what we had originally projected, to the tune of $232,000. Our hotel tax from our hotel property, Four Seasons, significant continued expansion, if I may, in terms of their revenues. Really, I think as a byproduct of continued strong economic activity in the region. So we're expecting about another $261,000 of additional revenues from our hotel tax. Utility users tax, we're actually forecasting a slight decline in there, primarily with the fact that the water rate increases that we had originally projected actually did not take place. So those revenues that would have been accrued to the general fund, we have to take that off. A little bit of changes in terms of charges and services, and this is really in building activity, the plan check fees, $36,000. And then lastly, in terms of, again, major buckets for revenue changes, and $100,000 in what we call other revenues. And there's two components there. We continue to collect some monies from the Lehman losses that occurred during the Great Recession. It was about $60,000. And then lastly, we were able to collect from the ABAG plan, this is our JPA for our liability and property coverage, about $40,000 to help supplement the losses from last year's flood-related costs. We look at the expenditures and see where we are, where we project we would be compared to what we budgeted. And most of these are really in the areas of personnel. As the City Council recalls, most of the costs associated with operating a government entity is in labor. We're a service organization, somewhere between 68 to 70% of our costs are in labor. So most of these reduction in expenditures, lower expenditures, is really from byproduct of two elements in terms of staffing. One, partial vacancies during the course of the year, and there's some positions that we still haven't filled yet, but we're still working on them. And then there are a couple of positions which we underfill. That is to say that we have a classification that's a little bit higher than the person that we actually put in that position. So I'll go into a little bit of details. $40,000 in savings, folks who opted not to join our medical plan, so there's some savings there for the city. Some expenditures, savings in HR and in the finance department, $30,000 and $25,000 respectively. Also in the city attorney's office, some savings in terms of unfilled positions. And again, these will be filled during the course of the year. It's just that during much of the year, there have been some unfilled positions there. And then lastly, in the city managers or administrative department, if I may, we also have some savings in our youth and family program. We have a temporary staff person there instead of a full-time, fully benefited person there, and also some programming costs that we haven't spent. In the police department, we're anticipating some savings in overtime to the tune of about $50,000. And then in the community development department, again, these are all combination of vacancies or partial vacancies during the course of the year in the economic development coordinator, senior engineer position, permit technician position, and also the management analyst position. And then lastly, we actually got a refund in terms of our workers' comp audit. Every year to come out there to do a review of the actual salaries that are incurred for the city compared to how much we paid in terms of premiums, and whatever that difference is either a balance due or a refund. In this particular case, we're getting a $50,000 refund. So this slide, or the next two slides, really captures kind of in table form what those dollar amounts are in terms of the revenues is on the first slide, all the components of the increases. And then on the second slide, these are the actual savings in the various categories, if I may. So at the end of the day, if you count all these adjustments, we're now expecting a fund balance for potential use for the CIP of about $6.2 million. Just put in perspective in terms of CIP, when the City Council adopted the CIP budget last year, it was about $235 million over a 10-year period. So obviously, $6 million is really a small number compared to the aggregate cost of the CIP program. Granted, it's a 10-year program. A couple other items to take into consideration. The City Council put as a priority in the CIP, water capital infrastructure projects. And again, just put this number into context. Just in the water capital infrastructure, we're looking at about $45 to $55 million just for that category of capital improvements. And then another item, again, for City Council to keep in the back of your mind is the flood protection project, kind of managed by the San Francisco JPA. It's probably going to be at least another $1 million bill in order to actually move forward with that project. So the point is that there's lots of unmet needs out there that the city has to contend with in the context of the fact that there are some monies available, but really, all things considered, it's really not that much money, especially in light of the fact that we really don't have much of we don't have a dedicated funding source for CIP, whereas typically a healthy agency would actually set aside funding every year, annually, for CIP projects, because really that's a critical part of staying healthy in terms of a community and addressing all the real needs of the community besides day-to-day operating expenditures. Let's talk about one-time revenues. One-time revenues are things that last year, as an example, due to the dissolution of the redevelopment agents, we actually got a bucket of money for one-time revenues. And the purpose of those one-time revenues are really, again, for the city council to set them aside for one-time type of expenditures, not those expenditures that you're going to see annually, because once you use those one-time revenues, they're not going to be gone. They're going to be gone. They're not going to be replenished. So I'm going to introduce a kind of a new idea in terms of one-time revenues. In January of this year, we received from the county something called excess ERAF. What that is that every year, by statute, we're required, every agency has to put in money for what is called the ERAF, and that's used to supplement education for schools and community colleges. That money is collected by the county, and at the end of the year, they compare to what they collected to what they actually had to disperse based on the formula as mandated by the state. And if there's actually a difference of leftover monies that they collected over and above what is needed, then they actually are required to rebate that to each and every one of those entities that had paid into the ERAF fund. So in our particular case, we received as I indicated, we received about $339,000 back in January. And it's really, while in the past we've been putting it as regular general fund revenues, it's actually not a very desirable way of treating these type of revenues. In fact, in a recent meeting with the city managers, with the county controller, he re-emphasized the fact that these kind of monies should be treated not as operating revenues, but as another category. And obviously, one of those categories would be one-time revenue. So what staff is proposing to the city council is to consider this $339,000 as one-time revenues for funding, again, of one-time type of expenditures. And if we continue what we did last year, those monies would then potentially be used to fund CIP projects and staffing for managing and project management of CIP projects there. So $339,000 to keep in mind. So I talked earlier about what we did last year. Last year, because of the dissolution, we had about $1.67 million in one-time monies through the dissolution of the RDA. And the city council actually funded, spread all that money out for different purposes. Most of that was for CIP projects and CIP staff, almost $1.1 million of that. And then the remaining $584,000 was to fund the general fund deficit, to kind of assist the general fund, if I may, in covering their structural deficit. So another thing that actually happened toward the end of last year that wasn't discussed with the city council because the monies came in very late. We received an additional $161,000 from the county for RDA dissolution. And what that was is that originally we received approval from the Department of Finance for our ROPS, our first ROPS for the Bay Road match. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, the Department of Finance, State Department of Finance, decided to claw that money back. Once they claw that money back, that has to be redistributed to each and every one of the taxing entities. So our share of the money that was clawed back, $475,200 in total, our share of that was $161,000. So there's an extra $161,000 that's available for the city council's discretion in terms of how to allocate that. Add that to the $339,000 that I just talked about a minute ago in terms of the excess ERAF, potentially you have almost $500,000 that the city council can make decisions on in terms of how to allocate that money. What staff is proposing is that we'll bring this number back to you when we do the budget workshops. So similar to what we did last year, then we'll ask for direction how you want to allocate that $500,000 of one-time revenues, whether you wanted to allocate it specifically into CIP projects or anything else that you felt was important in terms of addressing in terms of priorities. So this next slide is actually a summary of how you allocated last year's revenues. We had surveying benchmarks, you had a capital impact fee study, staffing, and a big chunk of that, $721,000, again, was for water infrastructure. That included water connection, second groundwater well, and a whole bunch of other items. In fact, we're going to, in an upcoming, later on this evening, we'll be talking about CIP updates, so you'll probably hear a little bit more about that a little bit later. But this is how the city council allocated that almost $1.674 million from last year, just as a reminder how that was done. Then, in the interest of letting the city council know and letting the community know and the audience know, what other funds does the city have besides the two which I talked about? We actually have a couple other funds that we use for specific purposes. One of them is the Technology Replacement Fund. This is to replace the technology, the computers, the servers, the software that we have that helps the city with its IT needs, equipment and software. And then we have something called the Equipment and Vehicle Replacement Fund. You see this every year in terms of funding. Typically, we use that money to replace the fully depreciated police vehicle. So earlier this evening in the consent calendar, as an example, there was a discussion about using some of that money to replace vehicles that are fully depreciated. And then we also have the fund called the Self-Insurance Fund. This actually allows us to address potential litigation that might surface that's over and above what is covered by our JPA. As I mentioned, we have coverage through a JPA. I mentioned earlier, we have coverage through a JPA that actually has property and liability. So there could be instances in which there are risks associated with litigation that may be over and above what we have in terms of coverage. So this protects the city in terms of a little bit of a backstop for such unforeseen events and situations. And lastly, we have a $2 million emergency reserve. In last year's budget, you may have heard me talk about that. This is the one in which there's actually a policy by the city council, which is to say that it's 15% of our operating expenditures. We've left that at $2 million, and again, this is another item that I'll bring back when we do the budget workshops and see where city council would like to do in terms of this emergency reserve. Leave it at $2 million, change the dollar amount, or change the policy, because again, right now it's at the policy is at 15%. We're actually about $700,000 below what the policy level is. So the aggregate of these other, reserves or funds that we have is $3.9 million. So, this hopefully gives the city council a broad picture in terms of where we think we'll end the year in terms of our operating fund, and these other funds that we have available, one-time revenues, and also these other funds, specifically replacement funds and the emergency fund that we have available. So with that, I will take any questions, and then if the city council so desire, after the questions, we'd like to call for a motion to accept this report. And then after this, then I'll go into the next part of the staff report, which is talking about the travel and the conference. So at this time, I'll take questions.
All right, thank you so much. Council members, do we have questions for our finance director?
Yes, through the chair. So, Edmund, for the one-time monies?
Yes.
Are we locking ourselves into just adding that to CIP, or tonight, if needed, we could use it for something else in upcoming years?
It's not locked in. It's actually city council's discretion.
Okay.
It is in the city's financial policies that one-time revenue should be used for one-time type of expenditures. And I'm not asking for any specific direction in how to use the money. I actually will bring it back at the budget workshops that will take place in May to give the city council an opportunity to deliberate how best to allocate that almost $500,000 in one-time revenues.
Oh,
Councilmember Rutherford?
Yes, thank you. Can you speak to the, I'm glad to hear about the increases, but can you tell me a little bit more about the miscellaneous reserves? What specifically is that, miscellaneous reserves?
When you say, sorry for the clarification, miscellaneous reserves, meaning the $100,000 in miscellaneous revenues that we received?
Yes.
So what that was is that we had, during the Great Recession, if I may, we had investment in the county pool, and the county actually held bonds issued by Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers actually went bankrupt, so as a result, we took, anybody who participated in the San Mateo pool took losses as a result of that. The county has been aggressively seeking to recover some of that money, and as the recovery come in, they distribute it to all the entities that participate in the pool. So we got about $60,000 during the course of this year. So that money's actually now parked under other revenues. The other $40,000 is from ABAG plan. Again, this is the JPA, and they actually have a grant program available, and we were able to work with JPA and use that grant program to reimburse ourselves for some of the losses that we incurred during the floods that happened in 2012 during the December holidays. So the combination of the $60,000 plus the $40,000 is the $100,000 that you see on that slide.
And the JPA is a joint powers agreement?
Yes, it's a Joint Powers Authority. It's the ABAG plan, and they provide coverage for all their members for property and liability.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I have. Here you go. Evan, thanks for your report. It's very helpful. Thank you. When you talked about the excess ERAF fund, the one-time funding for this upcoming year, is that a rotating account? Could we anticipate that the following year that the county would have these funds available as well? And if so, to what level?
So this money, one of the reasons why the county's auditor controller recommended not counting these as operating revenues is that there's uncertainty in terms of how much money we collect. It could be some money, could be nothing. It depends on a couple of things. One is the funding formula that's actually designated by the state, the funding formula for schools, that is. So depending what the funding formula is, compare that to what the county actually collects and what they have to disperse to the schools based on the funding formula. There could be leftover monies, and if there are leftover monies, then it gets distributed back to all the tax entities that kind of have to pay into the fund. So the reason why the county controller advises not to count that as regular revenues is because there is no fixed, I mean, that formula actually can change every year. The state actually dictates that formula, the funding formula for schools. And the second part of it is possible that the state government, and they have a history of doing that, of getting getting wind of monies that the local jurisdictions can have, and actually take that away, you know, either by legislation or some other means. So that's why we're proposing, staff is proposing that the city council gives this some consideration in terms of counting it as one-time revenues. And again, we're going to bring it back to you for further discussion and direction on how to treat this excess ERAF, but certainly from the city's perspective, in conjunction with what we consider as best practice and what the county controller recommends, is that we really treat these things not as recurring revenues, but really as an avenue for us potentially as a funding source, although not necessarily a firm funding source for, you know, putting some money into the CIP.
But you are recommending that whatever the amount is, be designated for the CIP.
As one-time revenues, and yes, we have such a huge CIP need, as I indicated earlier, right. $245 million, $45 to $55 million just for water, that I think it would be prudent for the city council to consider that as an option.
Okay.
If I could add just a little bit on that. Edmund has explained the ERAF in a very technical and knowledgeable way. The sort of shorthand of that is, if you recall, this was a way for the state to take money from local government. So they created these things called triple flip and VLF, and all these things got all tangled up together. But essentially, the whole purpose of it was for the state to take money from the local government. And there's only 3 counties in the state out of 58 counties who are getting this excess ERAF. So they're going to get wind of it really quickly, and they're going to take it back. I mean, so that's what the controller is very concerned about. In fact, he told the city managers group that whatever the estimate is, make sure you budget it only as one-time money.
Okay.
And budget it at half the amount that we give you as the estimate. Because they give it to, the state gives it to us in 2 payments, and they're concerned that it's going to be taken away at any time.
Well, that was helpful. Edmund, another question. You gave us a long list of cost savings that have occurred because positions have not been filled. So given that's been a benefit to our general fund number, we've also had to identify a lot of contracted employees, if you would, right, to come in and to provide service for our community. What category are we drawing those funds from?
So typically, when we have vacancies in critical positions, due to the nature of just the recruitment and the process it takes to actually bring someone in, it's not unusual for staff to contract out for those services.
Right.
So as for example, we have contracted out building services, chief building official as an example, to backfill until we fill the position, and we currently have filled that position, but prior to that position being filled, we actually contracted out for that service, as an example.
I understand. I'm just trying to figure out what category
Yes, so, sorry.
you're drawing from.
Right, so it's actually through the salary savings. So the monies that we otherwise would be paying for staff, we're taking that money and using that for paying of the contractor.
Okay. Okay, that's all for me for now.
Well, through the chair, whatever the order is, I did that. Yeah, following up on the, well, from the beginning where you were sort of summarizing the deficit last year, and there was a statement on what the deficit could have been, meaning it could have been larger, up to 1.8 million, without the concessions, the frozen positions, and the furloughs. I was looking for a breakdown of that. Do you have offhand just a quick, what's the breakdown of the 855,000 that the city saved by virtue of, asking employees for concessions and freezing positions and furloughs? Is there or was that in there in one of your charts? I missed it. Or?
Yeah, so the structural deficit, or the deficit as was adopted last year, was $1 million.
Right.
So that $1 million includes ongoing concessions for the current fiscal year.
Yeah, and what's the amount of the concessions?
My recollection, I don't have.
Yeah, that's what I know the general numbers, so I was looking for a breakdown. The 855 includes concessions, furloughs, and frozen positions. I wanted to get a breakdown, at least a rough estimate of, what's the percentage of each, or what's the amounts for each?
Yeah, my recollection is in terms of the actual concessions, is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $350,000 to $400,000, and then the rest are actually the positions that were frozen.
But it listed furloughs, so is that included in the concessions?
Yes, the concessions would include the furloughs and also actual salary reductions for the management staff.
So concessions and furloughs I can really consider one category then?
That's correct.
And you're saying that's 350,
So,
approximately
my
350?
recollection, yes, $350,000 to $400,000.
So about 500,000
And the rest would be
is
the
the
positions.
frozen positions?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think on the unmet needs, I think other people have asked, but I'm also, I think as we move into the early budget hearings, especially I think where we're trying to find out exactly what's the situation as best we can right now this year in terms of additional revenues, expenditures. to separate those out, because right now, they are sort of included in between the report in terms of some of your suggestions, which I understand you're saying ultimately it's up to the council, but there are already certain recommendations that the staff seems to be making, like, put some money here, put some money there. I'm not necessarily taking issue with that, but I think that for me, it would make it easier if, for example, in this category of saying unmet needs. So we definitely know we have a lot of unmet needs. And if staff has done some assessment of what those unmet needs are, I feel like maybe if we have a list of those and says, here's all the unmet needs and here's an approximate amount, so that at the point when we have discussions on how do we want to use, for example, this one-time money or, so I think it's good to include it in between, because as we go along the text, we kind of see where things could go, but anyway, I'm just saying if you could make note of that, because also there is potentially this need now that's come up with a creek, project, and I know that it's something that in the next couple of months, there's probably have to be some decision by the different entities. And so, if that's the case, then at least the council needs to have an idea of what the different needs are, and at some point, make a decision, which would then require, I assume, some kind of budget amendment. Is that correct? Technically, don't we, if we want to modify the existing budget, we would have to have a separate amendment?
That's correct. So what is appropriated through the adopted budget is the official limits, if I may, in terms of spending. So if I may address your first part of the question in terms of identifying projects or unmet needs.
Yeah, identifying.
So last year, I think we did that exercise, and what's on the screen right now were some of those unmet needs that we identified, in which the city council actually proceeded to allocate the one-time money specifically for these various purposes. Most of those are the CIP projects that aggregated about $1 million.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say that you mentioned like these are some of the unmet needs. Mm-hmm. I would like to see a list of all the unmet needs.
Sure.
Right, that's what I'm saying. All the unmet needs, because I think that's what the council needs to know, where do we want to put some money. And I know that we started last year, but every year is different, and I just want to have that opportunity to look at the entire list of unmet needs before deciding how to allocate some money.
So if I can follow up, so much of our unmet needs is going to be in the form of the capital improvement program.
Right.
So that's part going to be where we're going to start. We also identified the flood protection, so that's another need.
Okay, so then maybe that's a follow-up question. So what you mean by unmet needs, basically you mean capital improvement then?
Yeah.
Or because, when I read it, unmet needs, it's kind of, well, I think that is still part of the discussion that the council will have is there are so many needs in our city, we know. But if you're just saying, basically, what you mean by unmet needs is just capital improvement? Or is it open? I'd like to see it more open-ended, I guess. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So tomorrow we're going to have the second part of our retreat. We're going to talk about core services, and you'll get a flavor, if I may, of potentially other needs that we have over and above capital improvement programs.
Okay, so in the budget process, will you still be able to bring back a list of unmet needs that includes capital improvement plus other potential unmet needs?
I think we'll be getting some direction from City Council in terms of the information we'll share with you, and once you identify some of those other areas, we'll definitely incorporate them as part of the list, if I may, for your consideration during the budget hearing sessions.
So are you saying I didn't understand that last point.
So,
When is this list going to be potentially generated?
So this list that you're requesting is something that we can generate as a byproduct of our review of the CIP, an affirmation
right.
of where you see the priorities are, and also potentially from a discussion that we're going to have tomorrow in terms of core services or services in which we are not actually providing, which are essential for the community. So I think the combination of those would probably be the list that you're requesting, is my interpretation.
Okay. Well, I just wonder what the staff, I guess, it sounds to me that maybe the staff has already made some assessment, and I would just like to know what that is, either, an assessment of, but anyway, that's fine. I won't lower that. I think I understand what you're saying then. Okay. So,
So I think Councilmember Rico, you've asked for that assessment in the past, and it's going to be given to us tomorrow.
oh, okay, all right.
So you'll see.
So you'll see some of those.
Yeah, so on our agenda for tomorrow, we'll have a
okay.
discussion on essential city services.
Okay. With
So you
some
can-
money attached
So you can look
to it.
forward to that tomorrow, and there will
Money
be
to-
dollar amounts. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then on this interplay of the positions and also the contracting out, I mean, the numbers are here, but I think at some point, and maybe that's something you're also planning to do when we get to the budget hearings, of some analyses or some assessment as to why we're not being successful at filling certain positions, and how much are we spending on all the contracting out, and what's expected in the next, I mean, I'm just asking generally to have more narrative, and that may be more of the HR or city manager's office in terms of the, some explanation, some analysis as to what, what's going on with that. So I guess maybe that's a request more to the city manager. Could we have that at some point?
I can tell you right now, we have one staff person who's trying to work on HR, so we could only get through the recruitments as quickly as we can get through the recruitments. There were some positions added through the budget that you added last year, and we've had some vacancies as people have turnover, as is normal in any organization. And with one person, 1.5 people basically working on the recruitments on top of the day-to-day work of human resources. And as you've heard me mention, there are some issues that we are trying to fix in human resources. There's just the resource capacity in terms of people and how quickly we can get through them. The other issue that's happened is that we've come very close to hiring several people in several positions, and they have come very close to, they've gone through the whole process, and at the end, they've declined the offer that we've made, and we've had to go back out numerous times on numerous positions. For several reasons, they've declined, but it's been difficult to fill some of the positions as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's good to include that in a written report, because obviously, since we don't know those details, then it's hard to know. And also, what impact is that having on the distribution of the money? Or anyway, that's my.
Well, and perhaps we could talk more about it tomorrow. The written report won't say any much different than what I've just shared.
Well, at least you share that, so,
Yeah.
thanks for that, because I was wondering then, because at some point if, anyway, I mean, I think that is an issue maybe to discuss in the retreat, that I think we have to watch that trend very carefully. If we begin to contract everything out or a lot out, then, that's a policy decision
Yeah.
at some point, that we can't just continue to do that.
We're actually
but
not
if
doing
we-
much contracting out at all. We're basically going with the positions vacant, which is why we have the savings. So we did do it with the building official because we needed to have someone doing that role. But most of the roles essentially are going vacant right now, which is why we have the cost savings.
Well, and our human resources director position is not filled, right? So that
We have
position is.
We have a manager position position, not a director.
Or a director.
And it's not filled. We have someone who has accepted the offer and will come on board in 2 weeks, I think.
Okay, and that position hasn't been filled for how long? I mean, that position is responsible for all of this.
Yeah, it's been underfilled with a management analyst type. And Barbara has been doing a great deal of the HR work instead of doing a lot of the assistant city manager work, so that's impacting me. I mean, it's impacting everybody. It's a domino effect because it's such a small organization. It makes it very difficult. And we had lots of positions open. We had lots of turnover over the last year. And recruitments just take a great deal of time. And like I said, unfortunately, we had to go out several times on several positions. So it's been difficult. People have declined the offer once we've gotten to 2 or 3 months down the road with the process.
Okay.
And the last question I had was on the youth and family manager position. There's a temporarily being filled, and I just couldn't remember, but at some point we approved that position with a job description and everything. Is that an approved position that we had?
Yes, and it's actually in the adopted budget. But the incumbent
Right.
has
So
been
I
out
just
and-
couldn't remember what we had approved that. And the funds for that position, were those designated just a general fund?
That's correct.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Do we have any speakers on this item? Or were you gonna? Okay.
We do. For speaker, Wynn Gersich, followed by Patrick Brock.
Hello again, my name is Wynn Gersich, 30166 Industrial Parkway, Southwest Hayward. And since the East Palo Alto former lawyer, Mr. Larson, is now our lawyer in Hayward, I have to tell you what's happening in our city council tonight, because what happened with the budget a couple weeks ago, they had all the unions come in, and our city's kind of going broke. And what they did was they took a lot of money off of everybody's wages, and the unions are fighting again tonight, a different one. And what happened is they actually took $1,200 a month off of the people who made $50,000 to $55,000 a year. And then after that, and this is why they were mad, so after taking $1,200 a month off their paycheck, they voted to take $394 more. And I was at that meeting, and the union people went ballistic, but the fact is our city's going broke, and it was unsustainable. And our city's falling apart because our infrastructure and everything is not being repaired because of the high union workers' wages. And what they've been doing is they're getting a whole bunch of phone calls recently, and I get one every week, and they want to know what we want to be taxed on to give these city workers more money or their benefits and everything else. And I said, you know, I make 1/3 of what they do. And it amazes me because my health care is now doubled. Obamacare did nothing for me. And I don't have a pension. And I'm looking at all this, and they want to tax the people who are homeowners in the city that don't make that much money. And as far as the general fund, when you're talking about these needs, one of the things that East Palo Alto is going to need is the fact they're telling you the bay water is going to rise. That bay is radioactive. Fukushima is here. They've tested San Francisco, Pacifica, and Half Moon Bay. And Mr. Aprica has the articles on it at the Bosqua meeting that I put on public record. And if it rises 3 feet, all that water, when you talk about flooding here, that's radioactive bay water from Fukushima, and it's only going to get worse in the next 3 years. So I think all the cities really need to concentrate on something like that, because nobody's talking about building a seawall or anything, because when your ground floods and all that stuff seeps into your underground aquifers that you're trying to fix for your water system, you got a problem.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Patrick Brock, followed by Michael Francois.
Good evening, council, staff. Patrick Brock, whole lot of addresses. Let me see. So, the first thing is to being the president of the East Palo Alto / Bellhaven Chamber of Commerce, that the things that we are looking forward to move on this year is having things for the community such as education, so we'll be updated with education. for the youth coming up, and the housing, for people to retain their housing, and economic development for the businesses. Those are the three things that we're going to be dealing with, because that's the things that other cities are dealing with now, especially since there's no redevelopment. And so I need to just say that. So anything touching that with these empty positions should be looked after, you know. And so another thing is that I've seen so much money go back that had time restraints on it because of the city getting tricked or whatever happening with the state and the feds, and they saying it's okay, but then it comes down to you got to give the money back, you know. Whatever that needs to get did, first of all, is to make sure any of this money here doesn't have to go back to somewhere first, and see what the time limit is on all of the money here for that he said that we have here. Okay, and then the other thing is that these jobs are around the state a lot, and the jobs, the people salaries are better off in other cities. So when they do look at a job offering from East Palo Alto, it's not the amount of money to get job served. They go somewhere else for the drama. They just go somewhere else and look for a job.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Michael Francois.
Hopefully last time, City Council, Mike Francois, 224 Gardenia Way, East Palo Alto. The reason I asked Wen to come here because she's an environmentalist and she studies a lot of this stuff. And we've gone to a lot of meetings, Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Los Altos. We've gone to Sacramento, talk on fracking. We've gone on marches, we hand out papers. We've gone to Millbrae, South City, and we talk about these. And they actually ask her questions. In fact, she's been invited to comment. She flew to in fact, she went to New Mexico because they wanted to hear what she had to say once. So she had to speak on something. And a comment on what Mr. Brock said, he said about monies being wasted and called back because we don't use them in time. Ms. Rutherford, when she was sitting up there, she made a point that she didn't like that, and she don't like hearing that at the last minute. So I'm sure you guys would take heed to that. And also, you talk about capital improvement funds, the CIP funds, and you have some you can do what you want with. Well, sore subject, but serious subject. We have a police problem, yes or no. Sometimes you need them, sometimes you don't. And the overtime, if you don't straighten out your money problems now, you say you're $1 million in debt. What happens next year? Are you going to be $2 million or $1.5 million? Well, you have some funds where you can contract with the sheriff's office for those guys who want to work maybe 6 hours at our peak time. Look on a chart, see what months we have the worst crime or where police are needed, and maybe they can work straight time and come and practice their patrol, working beside our officers, straight time pay though, answering to our interim chief over there. Maybe that's a solution, and I'm sure you guys will make some good decisions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Those are all your speakers.
Okay. Is council ready to make a motion and accept and file the report?
I'm ready. I'd like to make a motion that we accept and file the general fund mid-year 2013-2014 budget review.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Mayor Gaucher, a second by Councilmember Rutherford. All those in favor say aye.
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 I think that was 5, right? Okay, so 5 yes votes, motion passes. And now the second part of this item, which is the city council travel and training budget allocation.
Yes. Thanks again, Madam Mayor. So back in November of last year, when we adopted the city council travel and conference policy, there was a request to actually come back when we do the budget review to look at the allocation of those funds. There are $13,600 that are budgeted for city council travel and conferences. What staff has done is we've identified what we think are potentially the core travels and conferences. This includes the annual trip to DC We also have the 2 league conferences. There's an item to meet the state legislators. So the aggregate of that is $9,300. So the difference between the $9,300 and the $13,600 is $4,300. So one method of, one potential option for the city council to consider is actually to allocate those funds amongst the city council members so that you have some discretion in terms of specific travel and conferences that you like to attend. And by the way, there are meetings that many of you have attended regularly, which is the Council of Cities. So those monies potentially would be potentially used for that purpose also. So what we have for your consideration is potentially an allocation formula, if I may, where 50% of the remainder, the $4,300, is going to be divided between the mayor and the vice mayor, and then the remaining 50% divided equally to the city council members. Obviously, this is only an alternative. It's really waiting. Staff is actually seeking direction from the city council how they want to potentially allocate those funds, if they want to allocate the funds. Obviously, one option is actually leave it the way that it is currently set up in our budget, which we've identified specifically what those travel and conferences are for the course of the year. So I'm looking for direction from the city council, the discussion in terms of what they like to do in terms of the travel and conference allocation.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, if I may, so my recollection of this November meeting when we had, I don't know if it was November or December, we had the sort of update of the travel policies reimbursement for the city council and also for the staff, I think for at least the top management. My recollection was that I know I made a comment around this, and I believe, I don't remember who else did, but I was frankly surprised to see this on the agenda because we're in the middle of the fiscal year, and I remember that we said we might look at this when we do the regular budget review, because when we do the budget review, we look at all the departments, including city council, which appears sort of as a department. So I don't know if that was a misunderstanding or what, but I'm just saying, just telling my opinion that I didn't see the need for this now because we're in the process, the fiscal year has not ended. And so why exactly was this being brought now and not at the regular budget hearings, which is where I believe it properly belongs? So I mean, that's my first question. Then I have other comments on this, but.
Yeah, it's staff's interpretation that this was actually a request, and maybe it's a misinterpretation on our part, but it was a really hard interpretation that was what the city council desired,
that it would come with a mid-budget review?
That's correct.
Yeah, well, that's not my, that's not my recollection. Yeah, because, I mean, back in November, did we see a problem with it, or did we feel like why? I'm just saying that in my recollection, in my opinion, this should be part of the regular budget review when we look at the city council budget, the city attorney's budget, the city manager's office budget, all the different budgets. And so, anyway.
The direction was very clear to bring it at mid-year. And so we were just following the request of the council. It can happen now, it can happen later. We don't have an interest in necessarily doing it now. It can happen with the regular budget. The request was very specific to bring it with the mid-year.
So who made that specific request?
Councilmember Moody, for sure, and I thought it was you as well, but I don't recall it.
I think.
I'm not trying to debate. I'm not trying to debate who said it, but I know that the direction was to bring it back at the mid-year.
Well, I'm just saying, I know what I said and what I meant. I definitely never mentioned the word midterm budget, because to me, midterm budget basically is a report on the financial situation of the council as the books close back in June, and as we to the extent that we know if there's additional revenues coming, what we saved. Not really a time to be reviewing specific budgets, but anyway, I just want to at least clarify that point. Okay, thank you.
I can go ahead and just share some comments. I think this is really helpful for us as a council to see. It's clear that we have about $13,600 set aside for council travel expenses between the 5 of us, and we've already used about $3,000 of it, and it's actually been more one council member than the others. But we can see here that we have a balance of $10,621.63. And I think that it's important that it's coming to the council because now we can decide, how we're going to spend the remaining $10,000 and, $621 between the 5 of us. As the rest of the year continues, we as a council need to know, well, which conferences are covered, which ones are not, how many conferences can a council member attend. We don't want to get to the end of the year and have overspent. So I think this is really helpful for me to see, how much we actually have in our budget for travel expenses.
And through the chair, I also agree with you, but I also just want to go ahead and take care of it because I do agree with Councilmember Moody that he's unfairly being signaled out for something that there's no story there. The conferences that were attended were conferences that were available to the council, and he is the individual on the council who attended those conferences. So the fact that the papers picked it up and decided to run with it, it's really, I don't believe there was a story there. But I'm glad that we're doing this and we have it. So now we can take care of it and move forward.
Through the chair. At one time, each council member had a specific amount, and I think it was equal. And I'm just wondering, what happened to that? Why was it changed? I mean, I can't remember because it's been a while since I've been on the council. But each council member had the same amount of money in the budget for travel. They chose the conferences or trainings they wanted to participate in. And once they used up that budget, that was it, and there was no problem. And so, I guess we got to this point maybe because of the deficit and some changes had to be made. I'm not clear. I don't have a problem with the way it's being split now. I mean,
Yeah, this is what's being proposed, so we can always.
I was just wondering, I was curious about that.
Yeah, well, since I've been on the council, I don't think there's ever been a dollar amount for each council member. It's always been, like, this is the budget for the 5 council members. But I don't know, maybe, I don't know that there's other.
Yeah, it was before my time, so I don't know when that changed. What we attempted to do here, and again, it's completely open. We were trying to leave it open, but provide something to react to, because sometimes it's difficult otherwise. We were trying to, some of the things that are listed are things that we very much ask of the council to do on behalf of the city. And so trying not to, for lack of a better word, penalize a council member in terms of dipping into their allocation if we're saying, hey, Mayor, Vice Mayor, we really need for you to go to DC and advocate on behalf of the city. And that's expensive. And if the dollar amounts are split up equally amongst everybody, then that pocket of money or that allocation gets used up very quickly. So we were trying to sort of take those off the top and then divide the other ones amongst the council members, understanding that the mayor and the vice mayor are oftentimes asked to attend things more so than the other council members. But again, it's just something to react to, and we're happy to hear any comments that you have. Or we can leave things as it is now.
Well, to the chair, and Ruben might be able to remember that we did have a budget specifically with a certain amount of money, but that's in the past. But I just wanted to say that I understand the mayor and vice mayor have to go to a lot of different events and affairs, However, anything that comes, to them should go to all of the other council members also. And I do know that the Washington DC trip is pretty much mayor, vice mayor, and staff. However, on occasion, other members have been asked to go too. And, when there's, you guys use this miscellaneous monies, if we have to draw from that, that can be utilized from time to time. But any communication that, or invitation, all 5 of us council members need to know about it too. So if we decide that we want to go, we can make that decision, and I don't think staff should make it for us. So I just wanted to throw that out, because to me, it's limiting my ability to participate in something. As long as it's not a Brown Act violation, I should have the right, because a couple of events have come up just recently that I wasn't aware of, and I didn't have the say in whether or not I wanted to participate. And then I found out that I was signed up for the Council of City Boards. All I'm saying is we all need to know and decide and let staff know. So, thank you.
Well, if I may through the chair on the recollection, because I was trying to remember, Donna, my recollection is that I think the specific amounts for the elected officials was more a practice of the school board. It just, I remember on the city council, I think it's been more, I would call it sort of an honor system, in the sense that, okay, so there's council allocates, just say for the sake of argument, if we look back over the years, I think you would verify that. Let's say there were $15,000 or $18,000 allocated. Well, it was understood that that got divided equally among 5 people, and that I also agree with Councilmember Rutherford. I think each council member should decide where they want to go. I don't think this should be dictated by anybody. And furthermore, I think that the practice has been that, yes, sometimes the mayor or the vice mayor, but it could be any council member, if there's a need for some additional amount for some special trip, then I think that was not taken from other council members' budget. So I'm opposed to that idea, I guess, to the proposal that the staff is making. I don't think it's fair. I think regardless of who the mayor or vice mayor is, I think that we're all equally elected by the people, and we're entitled to have the same, I think. I don't think we set up a hierarchy of privilege. On the other hand, I think the way that the city has handled it is that, if for example, the Washington trip, if there's a need to have some additional money, then we can put in some additional money, or we can make a little, we're not talking like, I don't think the council's ever been very, I don't think it's been wasteful, at least not all the time that I've been on the council. People have not really wasted money. So anyway, I think that's what I remember, that, that it's been kind of an honor system that we all sort of try to stay within our fifth of that amount. And as long as we're within that fifth, and I think there's no need to be monitoring beyond, like, okay, if it's getting close to that, then I think it does. I think the staff would tell us, okay, you're kind of reaching that limit, so if you want to do something else, then the council needs to look at it. And so, I would prefer that it be left that way, equally divided, but if the mayor and vice mayor need some extra funds, and it's obviously, if it's legitimate and needed, well, then it's done, but not at the expense of other council members.
I agree with that. To the mayor, I agree with that wholeheartedly. So, especially in light of our earlier conversations around the travel and the conference, my interest was to do that, to be able to pick and choose whatever conference was of interest to me and my personal development as a council member, not to be locked into a category of conferences which I could potentially attend. And also, just to remind the council that the annual expo event, which I attended in September, I was I attended with the support of the council. We actually voted on me attending as a delegate for that conference. The other thing is that I think we have 4 months left in the fiscal year to make a determination on how to add to our personal development as council members. So any fair and equal distribution of these funds, I'm totally in favor of.
Do we have any speakers on this section of this item? Okay. All right, so council members, how do we want to move forward with this item? We have a proposed travel and conference budget allocation here. I think we need to make sure that we have a budget
Yes.
when we leave here, so we know.
I just have one question, Madam Mayor. Is this just going to be for the remainder of this budget cycle, and then we can revisit this at another point?
Yeah, so this is
Okay.
just for 2013, 2014, so we're looking at now until June.
Yeah, I think we'd like to have this moving forward because we're in the
Okay.
midst of developing the budget for next year.
Right.
So,
Okay, so it looks like the 13.
and again, it's open. You can
The
do
13
something this year, but we are looking for direction for next year so we can build the budget.
Okay, so it looks like the $13,600, it's the budget for the whole year for all 5 council members. And what we need to do is decide how we want to divide that up. And staff has outlined the conferences and the trips, like the annual trip to Washington. So there are maybe about 4 trips that for sure the mayor and the vice mayor would go to. If they can, I don't know, depending on their work schedule or not, but where we would need at least a mayor or a vice mayor there present. And then I think the rest would be optional to other council members if they want to go or not. So,
I don't, to the chair, I don't know if that's what I'm hearing from other council members. I think my hope is that we have the freedom to pick and choose whatever conferences we wish to attend. Now, the trip to Washington, to Sacramento, those could be recommended endeavors, but that we not be limited to or obligated, right, to attend those events, that we have the freedom to choose conferences based on the funds that we have available in our buckets and to draw down from that bucket on the conferences that we're interested in.
so what other conferences are there? Because I mean, I know there's the League of California Cities, the new mayor and council member academy, that's only if you're a new mayor
Right.
or a new council member, so you would
we
not
get a lot of
go.
material during the
Yeah.
course of the year about opportunities to go. They don't have to be large-scale, 1,500 attendees type conferences, but there's a lot of regional urban planning conferences, issues around water, infrastructure that are regional in their nature, but they're opportunities to really kind of learn more about subject matter that can be helpful for our work as council members.
Yeah, so then let's look at a dollar amount then, like,
Yeah.
because people, I mean, council members still need to stay within a budget. I mean,
Right.
it could be 3 conferences or,
So through the chair, I was going to say, I think it is possible to do it in 2 parts. One, since it's on the agenda and we're talking about this year, I still feel that the 13,600 divided 5 ways, each person has that amount through the end of this fiscal year. And if the mayor and the vice mayor need additional funds between now and then that can be something that's done. And I'm just opposed to the idea of, we've never had that before, and I don't see the need to all of a sudden create to me, it's a hierarchy of privilege, that somehow the mayor and the vice mayor can spend more money because somehow wherever they need to go, it's fine with me. But every council member can also choose to go to important conferences that are related to service to the city. And they should not be told which ones those are. That's my opinion. It's never been like that before. No council member has ever been told or constrained to say that you cannot go. Now, at the point when they're asking to go, obviously, they cannot be violating, the trust of the public by just going off wherever they want to go. That's not the point. But within that, there's many different types of conferences, and I don't think that I'm just not, in tune with that. And then for this coming year, I was saying that for the coming year, we have time. When we do the entire budget hearings, we go over all the departments. And so why do we need to lock ourselves in right now for next year when we haven't started the budget hearings? We need to look at all the departments, including ours. And between now and then, we can think about it more and decide what we want to do. So, I just see it as unnecessary for us to make a decision right now for next year. And even for this year, anyway, I've already stated my position on that, so.
I agree with you about the conferences. Council members can pick and choose whichever conference they want to go to, but as far as the annual Washington trip, we already know that trip is for the mayor and the vice mayor. So
Right, well-
automatically, money will be set aside for the mayor and vice mayor for that trip, because it's known.
I know,
That
but,
happens every year.
but, with all due respect, Mayor, I want to remind you that every year, for the last, I don't know how many years, that has happened, and it has never been a problem, because.
We're not saying it's a problem.
Well,
We
but,
just wanna
it
have a
sounded like
budget.
that
No
every.
one's saying it's a problem.
Okay, well, all I'm suggesting is that, if at some point I can make a motion, that we split it evenly, if we need to be absolutely clear, the 13,600 are split evenly for this year, if it wasn't clear before. And then if the mayor and vice mayor need to go to some additional, then we budget that part separately as an addition that's needed for that. But not do it at the expense of other council members. We've never done that. I just don't understand why the staff would even propose that.
So is this the first time, through the chair, is this the first time that we're looking at a budget for the council in this manner? Or how was I know this isn't the first time that the mayor and vice mayor has been brought up that they go to DC. So how's that been handled in the past, since that seems to be an issue?
So in the past, it was listed, we had several items listed in terms of there's a DC trip, there was a new council's trip, there was a couple of items listed specifically in the 16,000, I can't remember the actual amount. The total budget was then allocated based on those conferences or those trainings or those meetings that the council at some point identified as wanting to attend. There was an interest expressed in November, or whatever the date was, to have more flexibility so that council members could pick and choose the trainings, as Councilmember Moody has described, for professional development. We were attempting to provide for that interest of allowing council members to pick and choose what they'd like to attend, and yet meet the interest of things that frankly the mayor and vice mayor may or may not want to use their money, their allocation for the DC trip, but it was something that the organization is asking of the mayor and vice mayor to attend. We're using the DC trip as an example. The trip to go talk to the legislature, that the organization is asking that of the mayor and vice mayor to attend that. So we just thought it was a way to, it seemed a bit unfair, maybe that's an overstatement, to have the mayor and vice mayor have to use their allocation for this trip, that perhaps they'd like to attend different trainings, but now their ability to pick trainings is much reduced because so much of the money gets spent on the DC trip. So we were trying to sort of carve those out, and maybe we carved too much. Carve those out in terms of the league. We think that there's going to be a new council member coming next year, or there may be, generally there has been one, or there's going to be a new mayor coming next year potentially. So we were sort of trying to carve those out as the items that the organization is asking council members to attend, and perhaps council members would have elected to spend their allocation differently. That was the intent. So we were just sort of trying to blend those two interests. But again, this is completely open. We were trying to give you something to react to. You can change it however you want. We're not trying to push anything. We don't have an interest in any of this. We were just trying to provide some options and some information based on the requests and based on the interest that we heard expressed from this council.
Yes. Were you going to say something?
No, I was going to
Okay.
say, so from these trainings, these are just recommendations, and these are things that we would normally attend as a council. Someone would attend these top 7. Like, we all don't need to go to Council of City dinners, but there's an allocation for those, so we can identify who would attend that dinner, and this is just parameters of around how we would spend the money as a council.
So the ones that we're, help me, Edmund, but the ones that we are sort of taking off the top or allocating is the annual DC trip, the League of California Cities Annual Conference, and the League of California Cities New Mayor Council Member Academy, and then the meeting with the state legislature. It's those 4 that we're saying, we think that this is something that the organization would ask of someone to attend, and then the balance of that money would then get split up. And you could do it by 5, you could do it, again, we were just trying to provide some options.
May I ask, what do you mean by the organization? When the organization would ask the mayor and vice mayor, who's the organization?
Well, it's again, it's on behalf of the organization.
I know, but what do you mean by organization? I don't know if it was the League of Cities.
What I mean by that is this, we have as you know, a consultant that works for East Palo Alto in the state and at the federal level. And as part of their work, this organization, the city, has made a commitment to have council.
So you're talking about the city?
Yeah,
Okay, but the city's us, though. The city's the city council.
that's correct.
And so that was my point about the city council in this case. Then I understand what you mean by organization, but the city council, well, anyway, I already said what I said. That I don't think we need a hierarchy. If mayor, vice mayor need extra money, we can allocate extra money.
Yeah,
And
so-
instead of getting into this, petty sort of,
I really don't see this as a hierarchy. I think we're planning ahead. If we vote on a budget tonight and have to come back later to ask for money again, it makes no sense. I mean, we already know we're going to Washington.
we've never done
Can I finish,
this.
please? We're already going to Washington. We already will have, and looking forward, we already know we might have one new council member, we might have a new mayor. We know we're going to these conferences already, so why not set those aside? And instead of saying, oh, well, if we have to come back for more money, we will. Why should we have to do that if we already know what's coming up? It's not new, it's the same every year.
yeah, but I've never been told.
That's my argument,
I've
so-
never been told as a council member that I had to give up some of my allocation for somebody else. That, to me, is a system of privilege.
I
It
don't
is not
think you're
equal.
giving up anything. We're actually preparing. We haven't even gone on the DC
The
trip.
proposals here says the mayor gets 30%, the vice mayor gets 20%, and everybody else gets 16%.
Yes.
That's a hierarchy
based
of
off
privilege.
the trips that we have to go to because of the positions that we're in. We have to go.
We're all council members, and so I'm saying,
So I agree.
if you need extra money,
If
then
we
get
can
extra
just say,
money.
then we'll make the remaining balance, because we're talking about now, at this point, you're talking
Yeah.
about the remaining balance, how that's going to be allocated towards the council. I don't have a preference, really. What we should be deciding, are these the conferences that we want to attend? And the top one is not for the mayor, vice mayor, it's for 3 council members. The DC trip would be for the mayor, vice mayor. If the mayor, vice mayor can't be there, of course, we would then substitute one of the council members to go on that trip. I don't understand right now, at this point, I'm okay with the balance. If we agree that this is what we want to do, the League of California Cities, we've already attended that, and the expo has already been attended, and that money has already been allocated. So at this point, do we agree with what we're seeing here, and are we okay with, it sounds like the council would like to make the balance just equal. There's an equal amount for what the balance is.
It's up to the chair.
Councilmember Rutherford.
Thank you. I wasn't a part of that conversation in November of last year, but I see the intent of this, and I don't have a problem supporting it. I think we can revisit it again at some point in time. So for the remainder of this budget period, I'd like to move on this. Let's take a vote. I'd like to make the motion that we provide direction to the staff regarding the city council travel and training budget allocations. So the recommendations that staff has made in regards to this travel and training budget.
The allocations.
Allocations.
Through the chair.
Okay.
So-
Do we want to make it equal, the remaining balance?
She's saying
You
what's
know what?
proposed here.
It's okay, like it is. I don't want to, keep rehashing. I understand Councilmember Abrika's concerns. I shared mine when we first started out, but I don't think we need to belabor this. We need to just go ahead and vote our conscience on it and revisit it at some point in time later on.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so
To
we
the
have
chair, I'm sorry, I had
Is there
a
a second?
question.
we have a motion.
Okay.
Need a s-
Councilmember Rutherford, do we have a second on this motion?
I will second it and propose a friendly amendment, which I don't think it makes the outcome any different. I think that the 13,600 is split evenly and additional funds allocated for the mayor and the vice mayor for the remaining of the year as needed. I don't know
So we have.
if you would accept that as a, and then we revisit the whole thing in the budget process.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, so I'll second it with that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Rutherford, a second by Councilmember Abrika. All those in favor say aye.
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 Madam Mayor, I need a little clarification on the motion and the action just taken. The issue of needing more money, if in fact they're needing more money, I don't understand. I want to make sure I understand what that process is. Is that to come back to the council pre or post any of that allocation or expenditures of dollars, or is that something that happens at the staff level? Or does it just get expended and then we just reconcile it at the end of the year? I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
I think that, you know, in my opinion, what I was proposing is exactly that. You have the flexibility as city manager to move some amounts as long as they're within $25,000, and then we, at the end, sort of reconcile that. That's exactly how we've been doing it in the past. If the mayor and the vice mayor have the need to go someplace, then the money is used. And then at the end, we find out what that is. So to me, that's definitely within your authority.
Is there anything in the policy that we've
There's
voted on
nothing
recently?
that keeps us from doing that.
It's within my authority to expend that level of money, but I don't have authority to take money from another budget to put it expended here. Now, if we're going to go over by a few dollars, I just want to make sure that we're clear, that's all. If it's going to be an over expenditure of very few dollars, it just gets reconciled at the end and it's not a huge deal. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what the interest of the council is.
You know, I would offer this, if at the next meeting you figure out what that amount is, and I think in 2 weeks we could approve it, an additional allocation from.
I don't know
general
what that
funds.
amount is, because the motion, as it was stated, was if in fact the mayor or vice mayor need money in the future.
Well, we can, you know, to the chair, city manager, I don't want to argue with you, but we can allocate the money. For example, we could allocate another $5,000. If they use it, fine. If they don't, it's fine. But we can allocate a certain amount.
So basically what you're
Yeah.
saying is you want staff to come to council and we should vote on it if it goes
Yeah,
over.
like-
So that's what you're saying. So
yeah.
we're going to have to bring it back and put it on the agenda if we go over the $13,000. That's what you're saying.
Or we could come back with an amendment, because I agree, you need an amendment perhaps, that says the city council is now adding to this budget, we're adding $5,000 or $8,000 to be used if needed by the mayor and the vice mayor. Is that fair? I mean, can we do that?
I'm happy to do whatever. I'm
Okay.
just trying to have
So,
clarity from
right.
the council about what
Yeah.
it is that you'd like me to do, because I'm not sure that I'm getting the same message from 5 of you. And I need to report to the 5 of you, not to 1 or 2 of you. So I'm just trying to get clarity on what this means.
The motion
$10,621 left.
Yes. This has just been really confusing because we don't have 13,006 left. We have 10,621 left because
Yeah.
2,978 has already been expended.
Right, but if you divide it out, that means that Mr. Moody is close to his portion, which is 2,700. So the other council members still have whatever amount is left. All I'm saying is the city manager can prepare, you know, some proposal that says, and we will probably need between now and June another $5,000 or $8,000 if needed. And we can approve that at the next meeting. And then the money's there. If the mayor and vice mayor can use it, fine. If they don't use it, then it's fine.
So it sounds
Our
like you'd like
finance
to,
director
it sounds like you're trying to add some dollars, some level of dollars to
Yes.
the budget. Okay, well, I'm just trying to get that
Yes. I mean,
clarity.
that's what I was
That's why I'm
saying.
asking the question, so I can get clarity.
It sounds like our finance director also wants to say something.
Yeah, I think I wanted to follow up with the city manager in terms of clarification. So if I heard correctly, and please correct me, I didn't, it's the $13,600 divided equally by 5. That means it's $2,720 per city council member for the entirety of this fiscal year. And the point was made, if I recall correctly, by Councilmember Mabrika. Councilmember Moody has already spent about $2,600 of that. So I just want to make sure that
Yes, exactly.
we're clear in terms of what
Yes.
what the action was.
And Gaucher have spent $860. And so there has been allocations.
No,
People-
there's not.
No, I'm sorry, that's the
Correct.
wrong number. It's projected.
But at the
Was it
same time,
20?
that we don't want to constrain the mayor and the vice mayor, but all we need is just to, I mean, as the city attorney,
So Councilmember Rutherford?
Thank you. You know, if I don't do a lot of traveling, and I haven't done any yet for the city, if I have funds left and the mayor and vice mayor need extra dollars, take it from my budget. I have no problem with that. I'd like to move on. I
Yeah.
think
Okay,
we
I'm
let's
fine
move
too.
on.
put a
Thank
lot
you.
of time in this, and that's what we're supposed to do, but I think in due respect of our public, we need to move on to the other items.
All right, so we'll go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
I've been trying to, okay. I'll
I
send you
think,
an email.
I think we've talked about this enough. Okay, so item B, 9B, storm drain master plan.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight before you is John Dowdy, Community Development Director. Tonight before you is the discussion regarding the storm drain master plan and an assessment report that was prepared by Schaff and Wheeler. Tonight we are pleased to have with us a member of that team, Schaff and Wheeler, Mr. Dan Schaff, and he will take the time to walk you through a little bit of this report. I think the frightening critical issues here, once again, is that we have underground pipes which are in need of in many cases, immediate work, and some a little longer term, but this is accounting again for approximately $39 million of additional work over time with the capital improvements program. So as we talk about the CIP in the next item, this is one of the reasons why this was brought forward, combining this together in this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Is that on? Good. Good evening, Council, Mayor. My name is Dan Schaff. I'm an engineer with Schaff and Wheeler. We've been working the last about 15 months on the city's storm drain master plan and have submitted a draft report to staff roughly a month ago and are working on revising that, but wanted to present our initial findings on the current system and the need for repairs. So real quickly, just want to talk about what the system currently is, what it needs to be in the future, and what that's going to cost. These kind of animate. So why do we do a master plan? Well, it becomes a great planning tool for the city to look towards the future, to figure out what needs to be done with storm drainage. It's a great engineering tool as these systems get designed. This is the basis for those designs. What size pipes, what size pumps need to be installed. And then towards the future, as we look at things like sea level rise and other phenomenon, that's exactly, or redevelopment, this is the great tool for that as well. Real quickly, the city of East Palo Alto has about 2.5 square miles of drainage area, urbanized area that drains to pipes out to the bay, to San Francisco Creek. It also has portions of Menlo Park that drain through the eastern half and then out to the Ravenswood pump station. Kind of a breakdown of where the city drains. About 50% of the city drains to the O'Connor pump station. That's the kind of lighter green color. And and the rest drains towards smaller inlets, or outlets, I should say, to the bay, and then the eastern portion of the city drains to the Ravenswood Pump Station in the city of Menlo Park. So the city has quite a few outfalls that drain to the bay, and these can be problematic. As you know, the bay tides move up and down. They move sediment towards these basins, or to these outfalls. Here's a sampling of what we saw. So there is an interest for the city to maybe abandon some of these and move to a more centralized system. We'll talk about that in a minute. The other thing we did was we looked at the condition of the system, meaning what's there now. Is it corroding? Is it full of sediment? Is it full of trash? Is it falling apart? And we used a sub-consultant who specializes in corrosion and condition. And in general, I should say that most of the pipes within East Palo Alto are clean, the concrete pipes. Stormwater is not very corrosive, so it's not like sanitary sewers where they're corroding and falling apart. But we did see a lot of standing water, and I think we can attribute that to just the location of East Palo Alto being so close to the San Francisco Bay, and with the high water table, water makes its way into these systems and just sits there. So those last pictures were in the middle of the summer, and there's a lot of standing water. And with that water is sediment, and the problem with this is that it takes away the capacity of these pipes. The bulk of our engineering time was spent modeling, doing numeric computer models of the storm drain system to see how it operates, what the performance of it would be during a large event. We use a 10-year storm event. Again, we looked at the urbanized area within the city, so we're not studying San Francisco Creek or how the rising bay could impact the city. This is purely the urban drainage system. What we're looking at here is what the peak water level potentially could be. So red is an indicator of systems that are undersized. This is where pipes or pumps need to be improved to provide a better service to the city. And just kind of a real quick, not really animation, but a graphic of this is along the eastern portion of the city. From the bottom is the O'Connor pump station, making its way all the way up to just past, that's Bay at the very top, and Purdue, kind of in there. So, next slide. If we look at it in a plan view, you can see that the city is fairly flat. I mean, there's not a lot of dip and slope across the city, so water has a hard time draining from most of the community. Again, on the east side, we've identified quite a few outfalls that are problematic. They fill with sediment, and since these are out in the bay, they require permitting to clean, which is very difficult, expensive. So we looked at alternatives to maybe eliminate these from the city system and centralize them. And this is our conceptual improvement plan. Red projects we're calling high priority. Yellow, this kind of blends in a little too much, is kind of moderate, and green are the low, kind of more your nuisance flooding, places where water just doesn't leave the curb and gutter, it just ponds. And going back. Yeah. And so the biggest part of this is really eliminating those outfalls and bringing them to either on the very top where it says Purdue, Illinois, and then the rest of the system would be brought down to the existing O'Connor pump station. So what it does is, instead of O'Connor providing a discharge for 50% of the city, it's going to be more like 75% of the city could potentially drain to O'Connor. Okay. Speaking of O'Connor pump station, we did an assessment of it to look at its current condition, its capacity, and we have identified quite a few improvements to it. Ultimately, if that's going to be the centralized discharge location for the city's drainage system, that there needs to be a new pump station or severe rehabilitation of that. But we've also identified quite a few safety issues that should be addressed in the very, very near future. So what does all this cost? We're looking at about $30 million roughly of capital improvements, from those high to the urgent to the low priority projects. And this is amount not uncommon to other communities. We're doing master plans, or we've done master plans all over the Bay Area, and we see this level everywhere. And majority of it, as you can see, is from pipelines and pump stations. We do have some money in there to clean the system, to dewater it, to remove sediment. But in general, it's upsizing pipes and pumps. And again, I want to emphasize, this is very typical of communities along the bay, on the peninsula. With that, you can ask me any questions.
Thank you very much. Council members, do we have questions regarding the storm drain master plan? Do we have any speakers on this item?
Bernardo Huerta.
Bernardo Huerta, 2124 Cooley Avenue here in East Palo Alto. I'm pretty much in favor of the two alternatives there to fix a lot of pipes here in East Palo Alto for drainage. But the ones that, the outfalls behind the village, south of the village, to close those off are just a little suspicious to me. This is not coincidental to me. I've seen other things like this in the past here in the city. There's more of a problem across between Euclid, O'Keefe Avenue and the freeway wall. Flooding out there, or standing water just stays out there, and there's broken pipes out there from the construction of the freeway, and that just stays there. The outfalls right here in the village, they work fine. They just go out to two little creeks out there, and by spending $30 million to send this drainage, this water to Menlo Park is an expense that's not necessary. And furthermore, I just see it as trying to dry out these two little creeks. And when you try to dry out these two little creeks, what I see right behind all this is the city moving forward to try to connect Pulgas Avenue to Dumbarton traffic off this loop road? Because when you're trying to drain or get these little creeks to silt up, that's what the opportunity you get. And I remember when the specific plan for the Ravenswood Business District was approved, that I did get an okay from the council then to do a socioeconomic study of what connecting Pulgas Avenue to Dumbarton traffic, or vice versa, will do to the community. It'd be quite a bit. And I've seen this plan before from MTC, and if you want a consultant, they have the report from 2002. Thank you.
Thank you. Council members, thoughts, questions for staff?
Through Chair, I just had one question. And thanks for the report. So the staff then is going to pick through this and try to identify some priorities, although we already kind of did that, but in my understanding that you're the staff is in the process of doing this, and then it'll come back to us along with our capital improvement budget to see where they could fit in, or if we reorganize our priorities in some way. Is that part of the idea of?
Right. In fact, we had that meeting with staff today, the first meeting, to reset these priorities and, in a sense, schedule them. It's difficult to schedule without a funding mechanism, but trying to pick out the most critical projects, and also the most bang for the buck projects. You want to, if you have limited resources, you want to pick out the projects that are really going to alleviate the most drainage issues for the least amount of money.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess that fits with what I was trying to articulate earlier with unmet needs, meaning, this year you sort of need to put everything on the table to reconfigure things if we need to on that list. And so this will kind of plug in some of them at some point. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Moody.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. You mentioned that along the pump station, there are some safety issues. Are they safety issues to the community or to the pump station? I mean, what, can you be more specific, please?
Well, they're an immediate safety issue for maintenance staff, but potentially to the community. And the issue comes from the fact that those are gas-driven motors on those pumps, so there's a fuel source, and a lot of the electrical equipment within the pump station isn't rated for being explosion-proof, so a spark from an outlet could cause an explosion. So those are what we're calling urgent. So it's a matter of replacing outlets, panels, so, and that's about $600,000 worth, and we're calling that urgent.
Okay. Is there any relationship between the storm drain master plan and the sanitary district and West Bay in any respect in terms of piping or downward gravity flow of water or?
Hopefully not. Hopefully the storm and the
there's
sewer
no blending
system.
there. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully they're independent. I think what happens is they both receive water, infiltration water from the soils, but I don't think there's any cross-contamination or cross-connections. That we didn't notice any when we were out there.
And at some point, when we identify what's going to go first as it relates to the storm drain plan, do you anticipate a period of construction going on the Baylands that might prohibit people from utilizing the Baylands Trail, or?
I think the projects along the bay would happen in conjunction with other activities, hopefully. So I think one idea was that if they're going to rebuild the levees along San Francisco, that might be an ideal time to do work at that pump station because there'll always be construction going on. Most of the stuff is inboard of the bay and along the city streets, the city right away.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rutherford?
Just real quick, when you were doing your inspection, did you actually,
Oh, you're right.
sorry about that. When you were doing your inspection, did you actually go down into drain pipes? Did you open up the lids? Did you see any mosquitoes come out when you did that? I'm curious because
No.
that's where they breed.
No, that is a big problem with the standing water. Luckily, in the covered area, we didn't notice any during the summer. In the middle of the summer, the water's been there so long, it tends to be a lot of oil on the top, and I don't know if that maybe prevents vector issues. I'm not sure. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Oh,
Mayor,
yes.
if I could just, one of the things, since we're talking about the O'Connor Pump Station briefly, we accepted the O'Connor Pump Station as part of the acceptance of the county drainage district just a few years ago. So we inherited this as a city, and we have been, and our staff and engineering staff and maintenance staff have been doing a lot of work to improve this facility, but clearly there is additional work needed. But I just wanted to put that on the record there so people knew that this wasn't something that we had been sitting on for the last 20 years and the council had been dealing with this. This is really something that's arisen just in the last several years as a result of taking over that drainage district. The other thing I would just say on the outfalls, many of those outfalls, just for the record, are not located within easements that the city controls. We have no right of access, no right of maintenance easements with those. So those are having to be negotiated individually with private property owners. And that is a significant reason why we're trying to look at other alternatives rather than having to also try to acquire easements or land outright for those outfalls, even though they've historically been there. So that is also driving some of the concern and issues that the consultant and staff have had with regard to outfalls. Thank you.
Thank you. Are council members ready to make a motion and accept this draft?
Motion that we receive staff presentation and a copy of the citywide storm drain master plan draft report.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Mayor Gaucher, a second by Councilmember Moody. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes with 5 yes votes. Moving on to item C, update of 10-year capital improvement program, CIP, and fiscal year 2014-15 capital budget.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, and to my left, obviously, is Kamal Falaha, the city engineer, and what I'd like to first say is thank you to Kamal and the rest of staff for their work on the capital improvements budget, and particularly in the capital improvement projects year to date, and for working with us through this, as well as Edmund and the city manager's office as well. This is a team effort, and I think what you'll see are some good results, and still results that we need to improve on in terms of delivery. So, we had to go back to this slide just for the public to remind them what is the capital improvement program. I'm not going to go through this, but basically this is the listing out. In our case, a 10-year listing of the projects needed to fulfill various kinds of capital needs for the city, including those under the streets, which seems like all we seem to be focusing on these days, as well as facilities, parks, buildings, police building, things of that nature. So it's various things that we're looking at. And then tied to that annually is a capital budget, which is where the council allocates resources to do certain number of projects or portions of projects that are listed in that plan. So for fiscal year 13-14, the capital projects totaled, there were 17 projects that were in that, with a total cost of about $10.8 million. And what we're going to tell you about a little bit is that many of those projects have been moved forward. Some of them have been completed. Many of them have been completed. Not all of those, and some will have to roll over into this fiscal year. Some were intended and anticipated, such as Bay Road, which is a large project, University Avenue Bridge. Many of those projects were anticipated to roll into future fiscal years. So this is just a partial listing. In your staff report is a listing of a number of the projects that were in there, but this is something, again, from the engineering staff. I really appreciate these are the ones that were completed. So that's a great thing. Unfortunately, this list is a little longer, but again, it was anticipated. Things like the Runnymede Storm Drain Project, which we can talk about, but as noted, is that because of environmental reasons, we cannot construct until September starts, when the clapper rail are no longer nesting. But the good news is that we anticipated getting a over $600,000 grant from the state to help us build that project, about half the funding for that, and that did come through, again, thanks to staff and the efforts of staff to do that. So that's something we're able to move forward and deal with this going forward. So this is something that we're excited about. Woodland Avenue, we had a resident come up and talk about that. Thrilled that the city was moving forward with that. And this is what it looks like. I don't know if anybody's been out there. We're now getting concerns from residents about people speeding on this because now it's so nice. So we'll have to deal with that. But I guess it's a good problem. This is what it looked like in another area, complete alligatoring, and that's what that looks like there. So again, with a little bit of money, Kamal and his staff have been able to really do miracles. Obviously, this was a fairly small area. You heard from a resident tonight about the Daphne area. That area is subject to the next paving project. We unfortunately got caught with the rain, and right in the midst of going forward and completing the work, the rains hit and they had to pull back. So anyway, we do apologize to the community for that. It was unforeseen and unfortunate. So Safe Routes to School was an important project. This is the Myrtle, so the after here, and I'm excited because next Thursday on the 13th, a week from this Thursday, Canopy and and Eastside Prep are going to be working on a planting program with the city on those two corner pieces there of new materials. We put in irrigation there, so that'll be kind of the completion of that project. And this was a significant challenge and issue here. Again, community asked about speeding on Myrtle. One of the things that the school district the Sequoia is moving forward with building the expansion of the high school site there, or the charter school site. There's a requirement for a raised pedestrian crossing there between the two schools. That will serve both as a crosswalk and a protection for the children there, but also to some extent as a speed reduction. And Kamal has also identified looking at putting in a special speed zone there and reducing the speed down and allowing for special enforcement by the police department. But again, when it comes down to sort of the baseline, bottom line point, enforcement is really the only way that some of that happens, and that's a challenge given the stretched limits of staff at the police department, we know. So the Rail Spur project, we're planning on having a ribbon cutting and opening in May for this, and this is the Class 1 bicycle trail path. Lights will be being put in. You approved a contract with the electrician, and we'll be doing some other work there, but again, anticipate a May ribbon cutting invitations. So as you recall, last year we had the unforeseen flood issue on December 23rd, 2012, a date that will live in infamy. And we did a lot of work there. Council was very active with this. Staff has been very engaged with this. This was a big slope repair project that was done. Again, I think staff, along with our outside consultant, did a fabulous job. This is what's exciting. We planted the willows as part of that project, and the landscape, the materials, particularly the willows, which is a native natural stream environment. And this is what it looks like. Kamal took this picture just yesterday to show that we're getting growth, and that we'll even protect that area even more, which is exciting to see. So the council recently saw and received and ultimately approved alignment for the pedestrian overcrossing. This project continues to move forward. Kamal and staff are working on a grant with MTA for additional money, hopefully toward the construction side of this. Also, we're discussing with PG&E the issue of the overhead utilities, which you can see in this picture, that we're going to have to deal with for that. And again, this is the conceptual of what that looks like, and this project continues to move forward. Bay Road is a huge project. Really, there's two pieces of that. There's the actual road project, and then there are the downstream utilities. What we're at this point is we're looking at October for completion of the drawings, the design for this project. We're looking at within the next month to have a community meeting to talk about the design of this. But Kamal and the team have been able to design Bay Road without the requirement for additional right-of-way acquisition, which goes many good ways, which is that one is that's a significant cost of buying and acquiring either easements or actual right-of-way. It also significant issues because most of this right-of-way that we would be having to acquire have some significant issues with regard to, less than clean soil, shall we say. And then also we're happy to announce that we've had very good conversations with PG&E. PG&E has put us in the queue for the undergrounding using the 20A funds, which are funds that have been generated, or at least credits that have been generated, which will take that requirement out of this project costs. That was a concern. That was almost $3 million, up to $3 million that we were looking at for that. And so that's a big issue. And we think that now that project, in terms of the undergrounding and the roadway event, are getting close to being synced together to work through. So Bay Road should be under construction in 2015. Cross your fingers and all those good things, but it seems very plausible and likely that will occur. The University Avenue overcrossing, we came back to you. We received a $5 million grant from the TA. Unfortunately, I will say Caltrans has made this project a bit more challenging for us. Kamal has been fighting tooth and nail for the community on this issue. Notably, they've required additional traffic analysis because traffic analysis was done several years ago. And that was not unforeseen that they would ask for some of that. The bigger issue is that now seismic standards have changed and they're asking for some redesign of the actual construction to meet seismic standards. So we're going to be coming back to you with ultimately a contract for additional design work for this. But we still believe that we can hold the TA grant as well as not put the almost $2 million of earmark money at risk. But this is something that Caltrans is requiring us to deal with. So significant issue and challenge that we continue to work through. You saw this already. I won't belabor that point. The Runnymede, we talked about that. Basically, happy to announce again that we did receive an over $600,000 grant from the state. So that has allowed us to leverage a US EPA STAG grant already and maximize those out to about $1.2 million in improvements. There still needs to be probably around another million or so of improvements there that we have not identified funding for, but we'll be able to complete phase 2, which is expanded basin work there. And we're still working with PG&E for some acquisition along the area for an easement there, because again, this is pushing right up against the baylands, and we have some environmental challenges and wetland delineated areas that we need to work through. But again, this project should be under construction in September. That is the plan, and that is foreseeable at this point that there are no issues. And again, that just is a little more detail on the Runnymede. So I'll conclude by saying that we've made a lot of headway, a lot of projects moving forward. I failed to mention in that just because the picture doesn't work very well. The Glory Way well, which will be, RFP is going out for the design of the treatment. That has funding available from US EPA STAG grant. So that can move forward, and that will come back soon to the council with a proposed contract for a consultant on that. We also released an RFP for the test well for well 2 up near the Home Depot. So we also will be, they're due tomorrow, so we'll be looking to come back to the council with a contract for that work as well. So on the water side, we're moving a number of things forward. We're working on scoping the groundwater management and monitoring plan and pushing that forward. That's required as part of reopening Glory Way well. So on the water side, there's a number of projects that are moving forward and out there. As was noted, we have been challenged with staffing. This is a very difficult time, particularly for engineers. It's a very good time for engineers. They get to pretty much write their own check for where they go. So we've been challenged. We've underfilled one of the senior positions as an associate with a very qualified individual, and we're going to be going back out for a senior. And we've also been utilizing consultant services. Those have been primarily paid through what we anticipated was through the grants themselves or the earmarks. So very little general fund to date has been spent on consultant work related to those projects. And those were always anticipated to be, again, driven and paid for through those, the Bay Road, University Avenue overcrossing notably. So the next step of this is just to start the process. This is really kind of our annual kickoff to the capital improvements process. Last year, other than Donna, you should recall that this is what you adopted as your project prioritization. And those, in a nutshell, were make sure we keep grant funding, preserve that, move projects along, make sure we don't lose that. To try to minimize the amount of staffing that's needed for project management, so move some projects that needed very little, staffing efforts with that. Move along projects that were critical. Council last year determined that water was critical, and you identified a number of projects, including the $721,000 in September for additional water projects. So one of the questions that begs itself is that to the council is does the council feel that this, again, these bullet points really reflect your project prioritization ideal, or is there something else that we should be looking at moving forward? So to lay out what we come back here is to try to lay out sort of what the big picture is. We then, as staff, go back and develop the draft plan. Those draft plans are returned back to the council for consideration, and then are processed through to the Planning Commission and to the Public Works and Transportation Commission, with a final hearing anticipated along with the regular operating budget in May, June. So it's a very tight schedule, it always is, but last year's work was a lot of heavy lifting to get to a 10-year plan that looked at financing and project structure over a 10-year period. So a lot of this work is hopefully what we believe sort of roll-up work that's recognizing what was done and rolling another year into the 10-year and rolling forward to the latter year. So attached to your staff report was just the start of a potential list of capital projects and the capital budget for 14-15. And what these reflect are a number of the projects that were identified, some of them that were identified in the storm drain master plan. Staff met and discussed and identified kind of the laundry list of potential projects. Ultimately, this project list gets narrowed by your prioritization, and secondly, by the available funding source and funding that is available to these projects. So it's a combined effort to try to deal with this. And sort of lastly, by the amount of staffing, in essence, funding you provide for staffing to manage and process through these projects through the various levels of work that's needed to be done. And again, this is sort of the last of that. So roughly in this, you're looking at, because you've got significant projects such as Bay Road, in the realm of $30 million in projects that have been identified for the 14-15 period. We recognize that that's probably a large wish list, and those one-time funds that Edmund has identified don't quite cover all of that. So there's some work to be done, but we wanted to come tonight just to lay out sort of where we're thinking and to make sure we weren't out of bounds kind of on the issue. We also attached to you, I know it came up tonight, concern about where we are with various grants and the earmarks, so that's attachment 3 to your report. I'm happy to tell you tonight that none of those are at risk at this point. We're moving forward with utilizing those funds, and so those are in good standing, and again, that's to the good work of staff to manage, monitor, and address those grants, and those are significant efforts to deal with that. So tonight, again, this is, we're not asking you to list out your top 10 favorite projects or anything tonight, but we are asking you to let us know if water supply and infrastructure, remain a priority, so that will help push along some of those projects as we move forward in terms of identifying and coming back to you. Also, we would like your affirmation, or not, that the funding prioritization that you used last year or some other you wish to choose to deal with. But we started with last year's just simply because it seemed to make sense, and it seems still appropriate and germane to the issue. Thank you. Come on, you have anything?
I just want to add one thing, that the special projects, John mentioned many capital projects that's ongoing, and some of them being completed last year, since the July of last year. We have other projects like with Caltrans, the Willow 101 interchange project that requires staff timing, and it's been really a challenge for us to keep up, with this workload and moving all these projects, at the same time. Keep in mind, any federally funded project or state funded project, they need like reports and requests for reimbursement to keep them active. So it's been really a challenge, and I look forward to filling the positions that are in my division so we can really deliver these projects. And that's for everyone, just as a reminder. On a second note, I know water is really the biggest issue, and I always, when I'm asked what's East Palo Alto's biggest challenges, I say water, water, and water. Because we have water that from the bay that we have to deal with, from the creek. Fortunately, this year it's not been an issue, but draining the city, like you've seen from the storm drain master plan, is another piece that's really important for me as a city engineer to program and look, the long term, how we can drain our city. Because one way of flooding the city is if we cannot really drain our city from within. You can flood from the bay, you can flood from the creek. However, still we need, in a storm, we need to drain the city. And that's really the master plan that you've seen is gonna give us that missing piece that I was looking for, so we can program our long-term capital improvements and address this critical need for the city. Connecting the two sides of the city over 101. We are really connected by less than 4 feet of sidewalk over University Avenue. I know water is a critical, but we need to keep focus on connecting our community by having maybe up to 3 point of crossing within the city limit over 101. That's really critical, and then I can tell you many reasons why we need to have this connectivity. And now it's our chance, because there are more funding opportunities that we can go after that doesn't affect really the water issue here. And we are hoping to get next May, there's a deadline for state, bicycle and pedestrian improvements, about like $6-7 million. We intend to go after that money and get construction money for the pedestrian overcrossing project. And we have a meeting on Thursday with Caltrans to deal with the 2 issues on University Avenue and the pedestrian overcrossing between Newell and Clark Avenue next to Pad D. So there's so much work, and I look forward maybe when we talk about the capital budget of more good news about these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Dowdy and Mr. Falaha, for that report, that update. It was great to hear all of the projects that are being worked on and see pictures. So thank you to you and your staff for working with the school district and all of our partners and making sure that all these projects happen. Council members, do we have questions for staff members on this update? Do we have any?
I have one.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah. So kudos to you and your staff and your team for all the work that oftentimes isn't appreciated because we don't oftentimes get the reports back and get the praise reports from the community. I wish the community did more of that, just acknowledging the improvements that are taking place in their neighborhoods. But as we go forward, I just wanted to know, I'm totally in support of maintaining the prioritization of the CIP program, and I would strongly endorse your earmarks and recommendations for tonight. But in terms of the grants, I'm just concerned, I'm interested to know, are there any grants out there that would cause the rotation of projects to potentially change? I know you've identified, pretty much A through Z, what you would like to do first and foremost, but it sounds like you've identified some funding streams that could be incorporated into the CIP strategy. So I'm just kind of curious if there are some things that might move up to the top or might, get shifted towards the middle.
Well, Kamal mentioned one of the big ones, which is the pedestrian overcrossing. So there is a grant application that's due assuming the council is in support of submitting that. If we receive that, that project would be likely come back into the capital budget and potentially be amended to reflect an earlier date for construction of that. That's an example. Right now, it's 3 years out, I believe.
Is that the Caltrain?
budget. That's that's the pedestrian bridge, the bicycle pedestrian bridge.
But is the grant coming from Caltrain?
There's a state grant from Caltrans that provide for non-vehicular infrastructure. So that's a prime example of one that obviously we'd have to make and come back and make a prioritization decision on that. I think that's probably a pretty easy decision for all, but it is one that would need to come back and deal with it, because at this point, no funding is identified for the construction, and it's out 2-3 fiscal years out in the 10-year CIP. So those are kind of projects. We're constantly looking and talking and working through issues. We submitted a grant to help for Bay Road. We didn't receive it, but we went after it anyway. We continue to look for grants to deal with sidewalk improvements and safe access to transit, and we will continue to work through safe, what is it? Safe routes to school, safe routes to school, and safe routes to school, both of those programs. So
just to add one, for Bay Road, we get $1 million from the SLPP with us, OBAG, One Bay Area grant, OBAG, that's correct.
Yeah.
Too many acronyms. So we get $1 million for Bay Road as supplemental, to the cost and to deliver that project on time.
Okay. I just have a quick question on the Myrtle Street project. You guys done a great job over there. It's, when Sequoia finishes their build out over there, I'm just a little concerned. Are school crossing guards a part of the equation? I don't know if that's your area of discussion, but you talked about elevating the street somewhat in some ways to create a barrier towards speed, and also to create a passageway for students from the two schools, and coupled with the fact that we have about 1,200 K-8 students who are going to school right around the corner. And I'm just kind of curious. I know you're going to do the sidewalks all the way out, but could we anticipate Sequoia or the city having discussions about school crossing guards?
We're going to have a kickoff meeting next week for Safe Route to School Cycle 3, which is a federal grant to deal with Bay Road crossing. I mean, we're gonna have like what we call bulb outs, so we can shorten the crossing distance, signage. So, and part of the work is gonna be looking at Myrtle, Pulgas, O'Connor, Clark, that area, the 2 blocks that are, you have like 9 schools.
Nice.
So we are looking at doing what we call, pedestrian audit. I mean, see what signage, speed. Maybe we have to come to the council and say we need to lower the speed limit to 15 miles per hour in that area. During the morning, maybe we're gonna turn it, somehow to like one-way street, or some like, educate the parents, maybe come this way, clockwise or something, so we can minimize traffic impact. So that's gonna be part of the project, and see what improvements we can address. And yes, part of the Sequoia project to have that plateau, kind of like, it's a speed bump, yet it's like, it's gonna slow traffic down. With the signage combined with other things, I think we are hoping that, we can address this issue. As far as like the crossing guard, that's something we can raise with the school district when we meet with them.
All right, thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I could just make a couple of comments. Your very, very small staff works very hard for this community and has done a great deal in terms of trying to improve the infrastructure. Thanks to your leadership in terms of the CIP, you've put water on the forefront. You've put all of the needs on the forefront. We have a plan. We don't have funding yet for it, but we have a plan how we can work through this for the next 10 years. Things will shift, as Councilmember Moody just asked, depending on the grants. These folks are some of the best grant writers around. If it were not for those grants that they're able to get, most of this work would not get done. So I really just want to give them kudos. I want to give you kudos for your leadership in making this happen. It's really going to benefit this community forevermore. And the infrastructure is no longer going to be neglected in this community, which is important.
Thank you.
we have any speakers on this item?
Yes. Mr. Robert Jones? Oh. I take that back.
Okay, so is that our, no speakers on this item? Oh, okay.
No. To the chair, I did have a
Oh, you have a question?
well,
Okay,
or
go
just, so in your projected fiscal year 14-15, you said right now this is kind of your best shot, but you're not asking us to give you direction that that's what we want there until later? Because I did have questions on that, but I'd rather wait until we do the process later on. Because one of them is, for example, the Highway 101 pedestrian doesn't have any money allocated. So I just had a few questions, but I think if you're saying that this is sort of what you're recommending, or
This list will come, a list will come back. We just wanted to let the council and the community know that we're looking at it, and this is really what I would call sort of the first cut wish list of items for 14-15. It was also an analysis for us to look at what items we're going to have to be carrying over from this
Right.
fiscal year.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I just want to make sure
We're
that
not
you're
asking tonight for
Yeah.
detailed analysis of this because it's not ready for
Because
prime time.
one area that I think, because I noticed under community facilities, because we've spoken about the need, and I think this is probably the year that we do need to make some assessment of all the city facilities in terms of what we own and what we lease, and the cost and planning for that. I know that the biggest one under that is the new police department building. While I'm in support of the police having, space, I think this discussion needs to be broader, so it's really city facilities. And I'm not sure that the council has specifically said, put money in there only for a police department building. I think that is part of, and I know there's been discussions at different times of even the corporation yard doing something jointly with the school districts or something or other. But that particular area, I feel that it probably needs more discussion, and the numbers could change. But even the direction, because this is very specific. It says a new police department building, so I don't think the council has said that's what we want, necessarily not excluded, but yeah.
Well, the police department building is in the current
Right,
CIP.
no, I understand that,
But you've certainly not, and certainly we would, as staff right now, I'll tell you, we concur, the facilities master plan is something that we absolutely need to do and deal with. And that $7 million, whatever it is, or whatever, is not going to show up in our recommendations for 14-15 because we need the facilities planning to be done in advance of that.
So, yeah, I
So
guess
that's the
is-
reality of that.
That is partly my point, because I think, definitely water's a priority. On the other hand, I don't want to just say, well, water is it, and there's nothing else, because there are smaller projects, even that one, in the long term, we can save money if we begin to plan for it now. If we don't plan for the facilities, then we're going to drain a lot of money out. So I guess that's my point. I feel like this is probably the year for us to look at that, and then look at the smaller projects that, with a little bit of money, something can be done. And I think, like I just call it like a small capital project budget. Because this is, anyway.
Can't disagree with you.
Okay. Are we ready to make a motion on this item? We have a couple recommendations here.
So I think what we're really looking for is the affirmation in terms of the focus areas. John, can we put that slide back up? There's two things here.
Well, that was, so there's the prioritization criteria that was used last year, which again focuses on keeping and retaining grants, and looking at the small projects that we can try to deal with, and looking at those things. And then really the issue of water supply and infrastructure, recognizing that there are a number of other areas that we need to focus on, including facilities planning, that we will come back with, but again, this just helps us get a start, and to see if the council is going off in a different direction than we're unaware of with that in terms of emerging needs and ideas.
And again, with these capital, 10-year capital improvement project, we don't expect that these priorities or prioritization would change from year to year, because that doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's too hard to keep up with that. But we just want to make sure that there's nothing else that's out there that we're not missing.
I think Councilmember Rutherford wanted to make a motion. Are you okay with that? Okay.
Yes, thank you for the report. Thank you for making it very clear that we have a lot of work before us and we don't have a lot of money to do it with. But I would like to make the motion that we affirm the priority focus areas: water, economic development, and preservation of existing grants and earmarks.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Rutherford, a second by Vice Mayor Gaucher. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes with 5 yes votes. Thank you. Okay, our next item is item number 9D. Oh,
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to disclose that, let me see, I'm on the right one. My daughter, is this one on with the Mid-Peninsula Housing?
That's the last item.
Oh, that's the last
the next one.
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to disclose it before we get to that, because my brain is kind of waffling here at this point. But my daughter works for Mid-Peninsula Housing, so I will not be taking part of the discussion on this item.
The last
The
item?
last item.
Okay.
The item after this one.
Okay, so you might get to go home early tonight.
Oh, is that the last one?
Yeah, it's the last item. All right, so we're on item 9D, update on affordable housing funds and prioritization.
Thank you, Mayor,
You're up
council
again.
members. John Dowdy, Community Development Director. To my left is Guido Persicone, Associate Planner, and he's been assisting in this work, and wanted to have him up here with me. And thanks to Brent, too. He was here. There he is. There's Brent, too. So I will try to be quick on this, and then allow for conversation and discussion. Clearly, as we've been talking through the last several months, there's been a lot of conversations about housing funds. There's the request that we all know is pending, and again, is subject to the next item with regard to Mid-Penn and EPA can do. And as a result of that, the city manager recommended that we go ahead and come back to the council with this report and the discussion about how we kind of proceed. So this is kind of a nutshell. It's in your staff report, but a nutshell of our current existing housing funds. And roughly about $2 million is what you have available. I don't like to belabor the point, but we turned over about $4 million out of the RDA housing fund. And so that for perspective, that's we had in essence, or would have in excess of $6 million if those were in place for doing that. And so this is significant in light of redevelopment disillusion and the challenges that you have and the community has and staff has trying to address many needs with limited funding. And that seems to be the theme tonight, the many needs and limited funding. So these are where you are with that. The transient occupancy tax, as we discussed, is 10% of the TOT. As Edmund showed, those have been going up this year, and so we could see additional dollars here, but has averaged somewhere between 225,000, 250,000, sometimes as low as almost 200,000. So when the economy was really low. And then we have housing in lieu funds, which were taken in. Again, and the Cummings Park was one example where the council approved the sale of what were to be BMR units, below market rate units, because they were challenged with selling those, and in lieu of that, allowed for the payment of fees for those 3 units that were in the Cummings project there at the Ravenswood Shopping Center. So just as an example of why that amount is there. So that's where we are, is about $2 million. So known projects that we have, we've discussed just generally, but have discussed the revolving loan program for second units. We have been talking about the senior housing project, and that'll be subject to the next item. We've had regularly funding requests from Project We Hope, which is the warming shelter, and we're aware that they are looking at additional expansion and assistance. They've talked to the county, so there's some issues there, but it's not unforeseeable that they may ask for the city for some additional funding down the road. We recently, the council approved using about $283,000 to purchase a BMR unit that was at risk of going back to the bank in a repossession and foreclosure process. And so that's something that's out there and something that continues to be a challenge and issue that we need to look at. We have staff, and it's in your staff report, discussed potentially looking at a consultant to do the BMR, the below market rate portfolio management, do the yearly work that required, and noticing to the owners, making sure the owners are still there, things of that nature. And then sort of the broader area of other that might be out there that we're not even aware of at this point, but others may be aware of. So there are a number of projects out there. We were looking at for a perspective on this, like a revolving loan program. If you were to provide, say, $10,000 per property for assistance, that wouldn't usually cover the full cost, but it'd be a portion of the cost for second units and conversions. Given $700,000 in that mix, you're looking at 70 potential projects, which is not really true, because it's probably going to be closer to 60 because administrative costs associated with the loans. But you're looking at, and it depends on your perspective, a large number that we could help or a pretty small number of people we could help. It's all perspective. But that's just an example of where you're looking at. And if you took, just 7, you took a third roughly of the money you have available for that purpose. Now, as we indicated, that money would return eventually, but that is a pretty slow return if you look at particularly a 30-year amortization period. And that's just an example of some of the things out there. So again, the transient occupancy tax at this point is the only ongoing and predictable funding source for housing that we have in the city. And that, again, $200,000 to $250,000. On a good year, we may look at closer to $300,000 at the end of this. But it's still a fairly small amount, particularly when you look at what the asks are out there. So this is important to look at. What is your prioritization? How do you wish to focus this out there? So what we are asking tonight is for some input first on sort of the functional priorities. And we've listed out some of those. I'm sure clearly there's others, and certainly the council may wish to identify some others, but to try to start to lay that out, whether you have any kind of functional priorities, and those meaning, should we focus on senior housing? Should we focus on affordable rental housing? Should we focus on affordable for-sale housing, for just as examples of that? There are programs for helping people with down payment assistance, for example. There are ways that some jurisdictions have chosen, and there are nonprofits that provide assistance to come up with deposit for renters as a way to help people get into those things. So, when we look at those things, that's what we would focus on and look at if you say, we really want to emphasize affordable rental work. Clearly, we've also came to the council several weeks ago to talk about the potential changes to the below market rate inclusionary housing program. And that will have some bearing, and you've made some recommendations back which have not been finalized in ordinance form. But those are kind of the issues that we're looking at. what we would envision coming back within 90 days with is basically a 3-year affordable housing funding strategy based on those inputs and based on sort of the known projects and known commitments of dollars already in those areas. So we understand that we can't get to the detailed answers tonight, but some discussion and input would be very valuable for us to be able to come back and look at a very limited resource. Basically, you're looking at roughly 80% of that money being a one-time shot. So it's very important how and where and when you wish to spend that money and time. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers on this item? We do. Okay. So I'm going to start with speakers first.
Okay, Robert Jones.
Good evening, almost good morning. My name is Robert Jones. I'm the Executive Director of EPA Can Do. There is a challenge here, is how to do more with less. We have less dollars to pass around for various projects. We certainly need water, but we also certainly need housing. We need street improvements. We need it all. I'm here to talk about affordable housing because that's what I have been doing in this community for the last 20 plus years. I think we can increase the level of affordable housing, getting people into affordable housing by doing certain things. Some of the things, there's 2 areas I want to talk about just throughout. We can allocate more money if we have it. But we also can look to try to increase where feasible our density in terms of getting more units in areas where it may accommodate a higher number of units that could be built on it. University Avenue we looked at is kind of a mismatch of zoning down through that particular corridor, as well as down Bay Road. And I think there's, in my committee, when I'm also serving on the General Advisory Committee for the city, and so we looked at and talked about our last meeting about looking at areas along East Bayshore from University going up to Bay Road. And I think we need to just be a little bit more open about and accepting new ideas about how to create this higher level of density, get us off the center and start moving in the direction of is it feasible, is it possible, and does it make sense? And without destroying the integrity and quality of life here in the community. So that's it.
Thank you. That's it, okay. Council members, do we have questions for staff on this report?
To the chair, I did have just, one is a clarification on the TOT, just, I think the ordinance says that it's a 10% minimum. I just want to clarify that, right? It's not locked into 10%. It says 10% minimum. Is that correct? I just remember reading that at one point in the, I can't place it right now, but that I think the way that the ordinance reads is that it's a 10% minimum. I'm just throwing that out because in terms of looking at options, and I'm not saying it should be more, but if at some point the council says, well, let's put it up to 12% or whatever. So I couldn't remember exactly, but I need clarification on that.
I don't recall off the top of my head, but what we'll do is we'll work with, our office will work with John, and when he comes back with the plan, we'll address that issue.
Yeah, I mean, if you could, because I think that question's come up a couple of times over the years, and I know one time I was actually reading, I just remember the word minimum where it said 10% minimum, which is different from just 10%.
and I looked at the ordinance, but I was focusing on the monetary use.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So I
Yeah,
apologize
That's
for
what
that.
there is, that's what there is now, that's what
Yeah.
we're getting.
Yeah.
But, I just wanted to, just for direction in the future. So then, what was the other question I had? So when you're saying like a housing funding strategy, well, I guess we have the housing element, which I guess ultimately guides what we're doing in a macro level. The housing funding strategy is aimed at, well, like it says, trying to see what more funding there could be or some creative ways. And I'm sort of mixing a couple of things, but I know I've asked before, and it may be something that, management is already thinking in terms of, right now there really is no structure for housing within the administration, it seems to me. And maybe there is, but is there like a housing department or a housing unit? Because I really feel that housing is such a big, it's a huge area, and it's, they're always talking about crisis, and it is crisis, but I feel like if we're really going to develop a plan that it's kind of a funding strategy, but somewhere between the housing element and the money seems to be, what kind of housing do we want to develop and where, and, there's these different areas, and as you identify these, this list, which is really, I think, good, that we look at all the range of things that, so is your idea in this funding strategy to also kind of put together some kind of, like a housing plan, like a housing implementation plan or something that, where the council then can jump in and say, we're definitely going to follow up on this home list, because we did spend some money conducting a study that was very up to date, but now it's just sort of, in a way, kind of sitting there. I'm not saying nothing's going on, but just sitting there. There's other areas that we have some ordinances, et cetera, but, I'm just thinking about that because I think that the merging of the community development department, I guess I didn't mean housing department, I meant division. The biggest unit is department, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just.
Well, city.
Yeah, city, but I mean, it sort of collapsed a lot of different functions in it, and I think we also need to discuss that, I guess, sort of the management, but the funding strategy, but also the actual specific planning and the management of this whole housing area, which I think it's, anyway, I'm just
Well, I
throwing
think,
that out.
I will say this, tomorrow's retreat, it's sort of a repeat. Some of that is the discussion about where does housing fit in the essential services side. We understand the needs, but from a city perspective, is that where where you want to allocate monies and staffing to deal with it, or do you want to look at the nonprofit and try to partner with them or some other ways? So that's clearly a conversation for tomorrow. I think with regard to this plan that we're looking at, there's an element to that kind of how we staff what we're dealing with, and what's coming forward with this is certainly part of that process. And it would make sense to include that in any plan to some extent. And I think we can get to where the council may be asking for in that. But what we're really looking, I'll just say this, what we're really looking at is that, and that's a question ultimately to that point, is that we have $2 million. Is that something you want to spend in 3 years? Or do you want to not spend all of that, and do you want to focus those areas? So that's part of that conversation too. We picked a 3 year, it's not magic. It could be 2, it could be 5, it could be whatever. But we were sort of looking at the $2 million plus what we knew would eventually come along with additional TOT as a reasonable kind of point to say, where do we want to go, and what kind of programs do we want to program in and deal with? Certainly there are, I won't say this, I won't say that there isn't, you know, there is CDBG money, there are other funding sources, there are out there, but they take extensive time to manage, to go after, and to manage and monitor and deal with. And those are things that also need to be discussed as we talk about an expanding role of the city in housing again with that. And so that's, I think, a fair conversation that the council and staff should have with the community down the road. But that is a big challenge and issue. And with regard to what was indicated by the speaker, clearly the general plan is underway, and that process should include a very deliberative process about housing, about density, and it will do that. And certainly we welcome any and all input from that. But we also recognize that many of our neighborhoods and communities are resistant to the idea of additional densities. And so we have to be very careful about what those, where we look at those and how we proceed.
Councilmember Rutherford?
One quick question. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow. Is this part of the agenda too, as far as the budget is
We're
concerned?
not going to talk about the housing funding strategy itself. We're looking for your direction, kind of the list on the last page of the staff report, which of these are important. But tomorrow, when we're looking at dollars and essential services and kind of continuing the conversation from the first retreat, we're looking for your direction in terms of where you want to put the priority of housing in general.
Okay, thank you. And then I'd like to just make the recommendation that we direct staff to return.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sorry.
Because on this, again, we're looking at, I just had a question on the affordable housing piece, or the secondary unit piece. So to me, it still sounds like we're moving forward with that, the idea that that portion is going to be approved?
Not at all.
Okay.
Maybe
I misunderstood.
All this was doing was saying, this has been laid out there. The council said, well, when you push forward, the recommendation of the planning commission was, this is something to consider down the road. But we wanted just to put that on the ledger to say that's been discussed. It's not been approved, not been prioritized, but it has been discussed.
Well, and the truth of the matter is secondary dwellings can be legalized now under there's great latitude to make that happen now. So even if the council didn't take any further action, there's a potential of providing some kind of revolving fund to legalize units now under the current ordinance.
So of these 8 items, are we deciding, we're not going to decide tonight, you're going to come back with a plan for how we spend the money? Okay.
Well, and I apologize, there is some need for some direction with regard to these 8 plus any others out there, of whether there is any specific desire to prioritize. And where we were sort of going with this is that recognizing we had a limited amount of money that was likely over this 3-year period. Now, obviously, there is potential for theoretically other monies, but kind of looking at $2 million plus TOT monies coming over the next 3 years, how would you look at prioritizing spending that money? And so that's really, we're talking about it, and it could be as simple as, we really think there's a need to focus on rental, and we could identify sort of ways that you might approach that, talk to the nonprofits, talk to partners out there. We're not going to develop this plan in a vacuum. We're going to be talking to the folks in the audience as well as others out there and dealing with it. But without that, it's difficult. And when we talk about rehabilitation loans, and that's that revolving loan, it doesn't have to be for second units. It could be for seniors. It could be for low-income property owners. So that was a very generic, open, but an area that says, is that something that you're interested from a community kind of improvement effort and everything, which I know has been something that you and the mayor have been engaged with, as well as other council members, but you've been very active with that. So, just an example.
Okay, so are we looking at a top, are we going to do the tier system, or you just want the top three, or, I guess I'm just trying to get some understanding, or are you just going to say we're voting?
What I would, so here's what I would suggest, if there are even 2 to 3 items on this list that are actually, that are sort of no, we don't want to go there, that would be helpful. I don't think we need a prioritization of how you do that at this point. We can kind of look at it and give the scope. And honestly, we may very well be coming back an interim step to this and dealing with that. I think this is going to be an iterative process, and I'm really not envisioning that in 90 days we're going to have an absolute probably plan to this. So I think there's going to be an iterative process in coming back. But if there are sort of no, and there's a consensus there, then that would be good to know now in that mix.
And I just have one more thing to add, and then Councilmember Rutherford, I think, has a motion she wants to make. But when I look at this list of 8 different areas, it's hard for me to sort of narrow it and say, oh, I want to focus on these 3 or 4. Because when I think of homeless solutions, for example, I think about, well, what is the population of homeless families in East Palo Alto? And how many of those families are we already serving, and how many more do we need to serve? Or like seniors also in East Palo Alto, how many are, I know we have like 1 senior housing building, how many are being served there, and how many more do we still need to serve? So
let me jump.
And you don't have to answer that right now. You don't. It's just something
here's a
I'm thinking
suggestion.
about.
It's late.
Yeah.
This should be taken with consideration. There is really, we have the other item that's going to come up that should take care of it itself on either way with that. There is really not a time-critical element to this.
Thank you.
We could continue discussion of this, bring it back when everybody's fresher. We could narrow down a little bit and get a little more detail to it. And that would be a suggestion that we might table this tonight and come back with that.
Okay, Councilmember Rutherford.
That's exactly what I was going to say in a nutshell.
Great.
Yeah.
So we'll bring it back. Okay, all right, thank you.
We appreciate your willingness to start the conversation tonight.
Okay. Our last item for tonight, and Councilmember Rutherford is going to be heading out, but our last item is item E, request for funding from EPA Can Do and Mid-Penn Housing. Another item that was continued from our February 18th meeting.
So I'm not going to go into great detail. Oh, we'll let Donna leave.
Good night. See you in a couple hours.
All right. Thank you, John Dowdy, Community Development Director, Guido Persicone next to me, Community Development Department. So before you, in essence, is a request for you to adopt a resolution appropriating $300,000 toward the of transient occupancy tax money toward the EPA Can Do Mid-Peninsula Senior Housing Project. This money would be used, in essence, as a match to a grant that was awarded by Hart in the county, which was what they call boomerang housing funds. The county designated redevelopment returning funds for housing projects. There's a lot of detail here, but given the lateness of the evening, I will trust that you've discussed this or thought about this, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council members, do we have questions for staff on this item, this request?
Just one question, since I know at some point the council did direct staff to meet with, the interested parties, because at the time we were debating whether to wait until February or et cetera, but is this 300,000 sort of the result of that discussion, or is this just I just want to know if there was some understanding, in terms of what could be proposed, or were there different opinions, or is this a sort of combined effort? Because, yeah, that was just my question.
This was a result of the collaborative, and when we made the application, when Mid-Peninsula EPA Can-Do made the application to the county, there was this tentative commitment, and the county are requiring a formal commitment. So that's why we're back here. But this was part of that. It's critical for them to have a decision tonight because they are also moving forward with another grant, another application for funding, which they can speak to, but I'm aware of it. So that's something that will be beneficial to be able to show this is being committed by the council. But this was a collaborative. Clearly, we all recognize that there is likely to be a request for additional funds and for this project, and that will be, in essence, through a different process down the road as we get more of a project identified.
I'd like to make a motion if there are any other questions.
Do we have any speakers on this item? No? Okay. So Vice Mayor Gaucher, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a resolution appropriating $300,000 in transient occupancy tax, TOT, housing funds to the EPA Can-Do Mid-Penn Housing Senior Project on University Avenue with the distribution of the funds subject to the following conditions. A receipt of the formal application from the developer allowing the city manager to evaluate the financial feasibility of the project. B, issuance of planning entitlements by the city. C, city council approval of an affordable housing agreement with the developer. And D, the commitment of at least $300,000 from San Mateo County from recycled boomerang redevelopment funds.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion by Vice Mayor Gaucher. We have a second by,
Yeah, second.
who was
Or-
that?
oh,
Both guys second.
both.
Okay.
Everybody
Okay,
second.
second by Councilmember Abrika. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes with 4 yes votes. And that was our last item tonight, so, oh, and one more.
No, we're just going to close.
Oh.
When you close, we're just going to close. Just remind that we're
So what was the-
just closing in memory of.
Okay,
Jonathan.
so, and this evening, we're going to be closing our meeting in memory of Jonathan Kelvin Watts.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night.
Who won?
Yeah, that's it.
Barbara?
My favorite.
Oh, yeah, she was 11-11, huh?